Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And today we're talking the Alberta independence movement. Things are going great. The petition's coming along absolutely swell. There was a little bit of hiccups, it seemed, in the beginning, but it is really picking up the pace. Even down in Arizona, there was a lineup of over 300 people. Let's get into it today.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for being here. And hello, how are you? And I'll read your initial comments.
Yeah, we will read the initial comments, but I do want to say this is a new day for us. It's all about the Alberta independence movement on Tuesdays and Fridays. So...
Rafa, thank you for being here, says, hello, happy to see you again. Same here. You've been with us for the past few hours, I guess. For yesterday, he was on the English live and then in the Spanish live, and now you're back today.
Well, if people don't know, I'm originally from Vancouver. We moved from Vancouver to Mexico because that's where you're originally from. Yes. Because politics in Canada was just too crazy for us. I gave up hope on the Canadian voters to vote in Conservatives or to vote for common sense. I also kind of gave up on the national government, but this Alberta independence movement, there's real hope again for Canadians to kind of stand up for themselves.
Yes. Lyle Norman, hello, says good day. And Non says, greetings, y'all. Hope you're well. Hope you're well too. And also, I can't bring it up on screen yet for some reason, but please don't forget to subscribe. It really does help us out. And thank you so much to everybody that has subscribed. We do read all the comments live because today will be all about Alberta. We'll just take breaks every so often and read your comments. Harmony Balanced Health says Alberta is getting its own police force. Great news. Hopefully.
And you knew more about that than I did because I actually didn't hear that. I was just reading the comment. And
well, not really. It is one of the promises that Danielle Smith had made. Still hasn't been done. Still not much has been done to move that forward. We'll see what happens, or if the referendum actually comes in before then, and then Alberta can have its, as a country, its own actual police force.
Yeah, it's going to be important to have its own police force. Luckily, Alberta owns most of its own hospitals, so they're already in a good place there. And a lot of the First Nations tribes had already ceded their land, unlike BC. We kind of covered that in a video we did the other day.
And Pete says we're growing the Alberta sheriffs to eventually take over. And...
yeah, and that might be one good way to do it. Just invest more money in the sheriff's department because Alberta has more control over that.
And then Ellie Bruns says, good to see you. Thanks for the info. Thank you for being here. And that was it for now, I guess.
Yeah, and all of our edited videos basically are covering the Alberta independence movement for the most part. Once in a while, we do another subject. Here in Mexico, things went absolutely crazy. So that was the whole show yesterday was actually about Mexico. Luckily, we're in Mexico City. Most of the stuff that was happening along the coast.
Yeah, but if you are interested in knowing a bit more about what happened, how it happened, what's going on in Mexico, you can watch our live from yesterday. And I'll also be probably doing some videos about it in Spanish on our Spanish channel.
We also have a Spanish channel, so...
yes. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, let's go into the first stories here. And it's going to be all Alberta and then Canadian news. A lot of the Canadian news is related to Alberta. So
from Marty up north here from today, it says independence petition signing for Calgary, Bearspaw, Cochrane. I think that's how you say it.
Well, yeah, and I put this story first because if anybody is doing this petition, I hope you're using social media to kind of get the word out there. We are getting a lot of people in our comments saying...
if you're canvassing.
Yeah, if you're canvassing. We're getting a lot of people in the comments saying primarily they were from Edmonton and they didn't know where to sign this petition. So it's good that Marty, and if you're not following Marty, go follow him. He's a huge supporter of the independence movement, but he's starting to put where he's canvassing. It's a good idea for all canvassers to do this. It seems like the canvassing is starting to turn a corner and it's getting a lot of signatures. There was a little bit of doubt early on, but I'm glad to see things are going well now. I wanted to make this first just so if anybody is doing canvassing, maybe they can do the same thing.
Do you want me to read it or no?
No, I just wanted to say this is the canvassers kind of needed to do something a little bit extra so people knew where to go rather than just driving by on the side of the road and hoping people's kind of seen them.
Mm-hmm. And moving on from Mario Celaya, he says, I can no longer watch Danielle Smith videos. My wife is going to start to get jealous because she's amazing, She tells it how it is, plain English, pure facts. And lately, Danielle Smith has been having a mixed reaction after she announced that she would include the referendum question about Alberta leaving alongside with other questions regarding more immigration and more Alberta as a province-related
Well,
stuff.
I was really hard on Danielle Smith last time, and I'm still pretty hard on her. I'm a little bit skeptical, but you were saying you were watching The Fringe the other day, and he had some new information coming from Keith Wilson that putting the Alberta independence question on the ballot with the other questions may not undermine it. I still prefer to have that Alberta independence question separately, and I still want to kind of pressure Danielle Smith to kind of put it on a separate ballot. So there are no contradictions there. But I put this particular article up here just because a lot of Canada outside of Alberta just isn't aware. They think Danielle Smith is an absolute savior, but you have to keep an eye on her in case she does take a turn like Poilievre did and starts undermining the movement. She's in a real position of power here. And if she does decide to undermine the movement by putting multiple questions on a ballot, we really need to keep an eye on her. So far, she's been pretty good until those ballot questions came up again. And the whole show the other day seemed to kind of center around that ballot and what she was doing with that.
Well, it wasn't that much new information from the Fringe or Keith Wilson, but rather more talking about it might actually help to put in questions that Albertans will already be probably going to say yes to, at least in most of them, and then have the referendum question there as well, kind of like to push everybody to think, well, yes. But that was just an opinion from Keith Wilson. It wasn't really new information.
Yeah, and I'm still of the opinion I prefer that ballot question to be a solo question on its own. That being said, I trust Keith Wilson. I trust Keith Wilson a lot. I think he is the best leader right now of the Alberta independence movement, even more so than Jeffrey Rath. I also like Jeffrey Rath, though. Alberta is in a good position because of the leadership they have with their independence movement. The legal assistance, the accounting assistance, building the framework so other provinces can kind of copy this and kind of they're the ones blazing the path for Saskatchewan and hopefully one day BC, but BC's a different cup of berries, I guess you would put it.
Do you want to actually watch the clip or?
Yeah, we can watch the clip. And I just want to say a lot of Albertans and a lot of people that really know politics don't necessarily have the same opinion as the rest of Canada. Mario's from BC there, and I do like him traditionally, but I also watch a couple other channels, and they're just not kind of aware of what's going on in Alberta with the nuts and bolts.
And then came Justin Trudeau's disastrous open border immigration policies, which have caused an unprecedented strain on our healthcare, education, and other social programs. In just the last 5 years of Trudeau's tenure, Alberta grew by almost 600,000 people to more than 5 million, all while Ottawa throttled our most important job-creating industries and prioritized immigration away from economic migrants and instead focused on international students, temporary workers, and asylum seekers. Adding 600,000 people in 5 years is like adding half the city of Calgary or Edmonton in 5 years. Although sustainable immigration has always been an important part of our provincial growth model, throwing the doors wide open to anyone and everyone across the globe has flooded our classrooms, emergency rooms, and social support systems with far too many people.
Yeah, and statements like this, we're going to go more into those statements because she had quite a few press conferences in the last few days, but statements like this is going to make her incredibly popular on the national scale. A lot of other provinces and people in BC where we used to live, and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and most of Canada are wishing they had a premier that stood up like that rather than David Eby or a Doug Ford who has TDS, and that's all he seems to be able to talk about.
Well, but even with that, and she is saying what most common sense conservatives, I believe, are thinking, and because she's the only one, and because the federal Conservative Party has, and Pierre Poilievre have continued to bow down to Carney and to the Liberals when it comes to voting, when it comes to taking the actual decisions, she stands out as one of the few that is saying it as it is. But that doesn't mean that that takes away from her potentially sovereign Alberta within a united Canada in a kind of Quebecish scheme.
Yeah, her future is going to be very interesting because if Poilievre loses another national election and possibly another one after that, depending what happens, she's in a great position for a lot of Canadians to take up that national role. I'd much rather see her than a Doug Ford. Although I'm much more in favor of the independence movement than the national movement in Canada. I just don't think the national movement is conservative enough for me, and they make too many compromises on a lot of their first principles. They are providing a safety net in case the independence vote doesn't go the way I hope it does.
And I think you have another clip to kind of contrast that one.
Yeah, and I put in some clips because the national conversation right now is about a lot of the statements Danielle Smith gave in the past that are contradicting her current statement about Alberta immigration. She was asking for a lot of immigrants to come into the province before, and now she's asking for the opposite. So they're kind of showing that contradiction. I'll also admit I added these clips because I was a little bit pissed at Danielle Smith from the last episode we did, where I really think she's undermining the petition of Alberta independence by flooding it with contradictory questions. Then again, I could be wrong because if Keith Wilson did make that statement, although I didn't see it, if Keith Wilson made the statement saying it's not going to undermine...
It wasn't a statement. I think it was just an opinion he gave at some point in some interview lately.
So I've said, let's have an aggressive target to double our population. I'm going to put this out there because I've said that in the throne speech. I want people to understand how important that is. So I've said, let's...
Okay, yeah, we got the longer clip. That was the first one I found, so I wanted to put it in there. And I don't think she has necessarily a problem with immigration, but she wants a certain kind of immigration. Alberta has the best jobs in Canada by far. They pay the most taxes because they have the best paying jobs. And Albertans, I don't think, mind immigrants from other provinces that are willing to migrate that are originally from Canada. But you don't want to be flooded from immigrants from foreign countries like China or India that haven't really adopted the culture of Canada.
But also BC is the perfect example of a province that has fully allowed that, but at the same time done nothing for its infrastructure, continues to promise that there's going to be more housing, they're going to continue expanding. And yet, because of all of the restrictions and bureaucracy that they've built around just trying to get more housing out there, they're not delivering on that either. So now there's more and more people with less and less space and with less job opportunities too.
Yeah, I have also worked in the oil industry and the underground mining industry, primarily in BC, but a little bit in Alberta. And I'll say Alberta needs to really protect their industries and protect their citizens. BC is going the opposite direction. They're literally lobbying the government for Chinese foreign workers to come in to work these mines and undermine the mining unions within those provinces. Also, what's happening, it's interesting. We had an article the other day about the federal government wanting to bring in Chinese security companies to guard these natural resource sites, which seems absolutely insane to me. But a secondary layer of that is these Chinese security companies are bringing illegal weapons with them, and they're allowed to have illegal weapons, but the Canadian government wants to confiscate these weapons from Canadian citizens. I mean, it's crazy on every level. The BC government really hasn't had traditional Canadians values at heart and tried to protect their jobs, not like Alberta has. I'm really disappointed on what was happening in the underground mining industry in BC when I was there and the direction it was going. 70% of all mining companies, their headquarters are in Canada. The issue with that is they're Canadian by name only. Mm-hmm. The majority of them are owned by Chinese companies.
Yeah, Chinese companies that always have to have a CCP person there to monitor and make sure that everything's going according to what the CCP wants. And I always find it funny because here in Latin America, there has been ongoing conversations about these Canadian mining companies going in and trying to extract as much as possible, with governments allowing them to go into protected lands. I'm thinking, for example, Chile and Argentina did allow it for a while. Some of it has been stalled now, but I kept telling people, and it kept coming up, that it was actually, yes, Canadian companies, but owned almost fully, if not wholly, by the CCP.
They're Canadian companies.
China,
they're Canadian companies by name only, and that's why if Alberta gets its independence, they can say we're
an actual Canadian company.
Or we're a real Albertan company at that point. We're not owned by the Chinese, and they can keep the Chinese kind of out of those specific industries from taking them over, because a lot of these countries don't know when they invite these Canadian mining companies into their country, they're actually inviting China in.
Speaking of, because you mentioned firearms at some point, but speaking of that, from Marty up north, he also says, I just heard from one of my sources that the RCMP is selling our PAL renewals for anyone with a formerly restricted, now prohibited firearm until and unless they self-declare through the confiscation portal. This is totally despicable behavior from an agency with an already tarnished image.
Yeah, and when the jibby jab era kind of happened in Canada, I decided, well, I need to leave the country now. It took me 4 years to save enough money. Well, it took us 4 years to save enough money. Yep. We eventually did, but as a backup plan, I mean, I ended up getting my PAL license, but I never ended up getting a firearm. But now I'm getting emails constantly from the federal government talking about, I need to turn in my guns. I need to turn in my guns. I don't even have any guns. I have a freaking license and they're demanding that I turn in guns that I don't have. I mean, I'm getting these emails on probably twice a month right now for something I don't have. You think they would know if I had a firearm or not?
Yeah, but again, it goes to show how organized they have been being.
Well, yeah, and I also put that article in there because gun culture is a big part of Alberta's culture, and the federal government is going directly after that right now, and they're not making any carve outs. They want to keep going with this gun confiscation program. There is rumors they're failing on a massive level, so they're going to kind of pull back and reorganize, try to figure out how they can actually do this thing. It's important that people really push back on this. My grandfather used to own one of the largest firearm stores in Western Canada. At one point, he bought 10,000 AK-47s when they used to be legal in Canada. And what happened is the federal government made those illegal, sent a government worker out to his firearm store and made him melt them all down. It absolutely bankrupted him and destroyed any real future of his gun store or firearm store, I should say.
Firearm store. But going back to Daniel Smith from Scott Robertson, quote, Daniel Smith pulls a masterful deflection to justify your 2024 pledge to double Alberta's population by blaming the federal government. And again, there have been more and more, and there have been for a while, but there's been lately more and more differing opinions about Daniel Smith.
Well, Pierre Poilievre and Danielle Smith has now changed their stance. I like their change of stance. I don't like the position they used to have. But let's take a look at what she's saying.
I think some of the issues raised here are issues that you were championing not that long ago. We have a clip from an interview you gave in 2024. Let's just take a listen to that.
The fact that so many people come to our province, I look at that as a positive, and we want to keep that going. That's why I've said, let's have an aggressive target to double our population. I'm going to put this out there because I've said that in the throne speech. So I want people to understand how important that is. We have to be that bastion of liberty, and people are going to want to come here, and we want to embrace them.
How do you square that with where we are today and the conversation we're having around limiting services and trying to limit the number of immigrants moving into the province?
Well, it's all a matter of pacing. I mean, I have no doubt that at some point Alberta will double its population. We have many times in the last century, and over the next century, I imagine at some point we're going to exceed British Columbia in our overall population. That's what some of the demographers are now saying. And maybe by 2100, we might end up doubling our population. But you can't double your population in 3 years, which is what it seemed like the federal government was doing. They brought 6 million people into the country in the last 4 years, and about 600,000 of those made their way to Alberta. It's just simply too much for us to be able to absorb, whether it's jobs, whether it's being able to find people homes and rental accommodation, whether it's room in our schools, room in our hospitals. Affordability across the board has created problems and tensions. So you have to have the right pace. I mean, I think Alberta will always be that beacon of freedom, and people will want to come here. But we also have to make sure that the reason they're coming. Okay, and you can pause it for a quick
second. That being said, I mean, Quebec has quotas, and the way people immigrate, they're forced to adopt the language, and they're able to protect their culture a lot more than Alberta. Everybody knows Alberta has taxation without representation, and the federal government absolutely wants to flood Alberta with immigrants. Number one, they want to undermine the independence vote, but number two, that's where all the jobs are at, and they would prefer to give those jobs from newly found immigrants to the country rather than Canadian citizens that have been here for generations.
Here is for the reasons that we've had historically, that they've got a good paying job. If you come here with a good paying job and you're already a taxpayer, then you can move on a pathway to become a permanent resident and then ultimately a citizen. But with the number of temporary workers, international students, asylum seekers that the federal government let in over the last number of years, it's actually created a huge burden, not only on our social systems, but I think on social systems across the country, which is why you now see that even this federal government has had to reverse course on that.
But if you arrive in the province, if this goes.
Okay, yeah, and I'll say one more thing. Let's just remember what's happening at Tim Hortons and a lot of businesses that are like Tim Hortons. why are they hiring these immigrants that are fresh into the country? And the thing is, the federal government is offering a 30% subsidy to the company itself. So the companies now prefer to hire newly landed immigrants rather than Canadian citizens. There's a huge financial benefit. And what happens if they expand that into natural resource sectors? You're going to absolutely hollow out a lot of these natural resource sectors from actual Canadian workers. The Chinese government's already trying to lobby the government and has been lobbying the government to do this within the mining industry.
But I also think she said something very revealing there, and I don't even know if she realized she was doing it or not. But she mentioned that Alberta might be able to continue its population growth, even maybe surpassing British Columbia's, which again, we just said that most of it there is, and just from living it, most of it there is coming from an outsize of immigration coming in and already grown adults coming in. But she said that Alberta might, according to demographers, get beyond that, which might be because it's a bit more of a conservative, or quite more of a conservative society that still probably does value children and faith and religion and etc., and sees that as something important. The conversation having moved now completely apparently from having more kids and creating the necessary circumstances to incentivize younger people to have families and to continue growth locally as well, is insane to me that that conversation has completely moved away from incentivizing and making the conditions necessary for younger people to afford and want to have kids and be able to have kids, grow the population that way, rather than it's always about importing more people and finding more people just to fill out the numbers instead of having homegrown, literally homegrown raised families and children.
The East Coast of Canada wants to artificially inflate their numbers through GDP just by having more citizens, a lower quality of life, but it offers a higher GDP to the federal government. Alberta doesn't necessarily need that because they have the best paying jobs in Canada. And if I look at BC, where we were originally from, they absolutely cannibalized their immigration system. They have one of the worst. There is no integration when immigrants come into BC. That's why all the Chinese immigrants head to Richmond. It's all Chinese signs. There's no signs in English. Yeah. A lot of the times when you walk into the businesses, the people don't even speak English. So English speakers just stay out of Richmond a lot of the time. Same thing is happening to Surrey. You have these conclaves.
And it's become conclaves. But it has become, even with Surrey and the Richmond population in certain areas, they have become also more dangerous because exactly more people don't want to head over there, and the integration is just not happening. So it also allows for bad things, I will say, and criminal gangs, etc., to fester among them.
Yeah, well, and the integration would normally be an adoption of a culture, but Canada no longer has a unifying, identifiable culture. You can still keep aspects of your original culture in your home, but you used to be expected to have more of a unifying Canadian identity, which Canada seems to be losing under the Liberal government over a decade now.
And there's another way in which Danielle Smith recently, I think at least, did reveal herself and did reveal more maybe than she wanted to, when she was asked if the referendum questions were constitutional. And she stated her immigration, YEG Wave says, she stated her immigration questions are above board given what already exists in Quebec. And going back to that thought that maybe Danielle Smith, with her whole have a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, is maybe trying to implement something more similar to what maybe Quebec has, rather than continue to allow and continue to fully support, maybe as the date gets closer, the referendum and actual Albertan independence.
Well, and that's a bad plan if that is her plan, to get more political power for Alberta like the Quebec model. It's time for Alberta to separate, declare its independence. The Canadian system is rigged with the Laurentian elites and the East Coast of Canada. They're not going to cede more power to Alberta or these Western provinces because they have the system rigged to liberal nationalism just the way they like it. Oh, did the sound go?
Sound again?
Try to play another clip real quick. If it has gone out, I'll reset the soundboard and we'll go on.
Yeah, it's not working.
It is? Okay. Give us like 30 seconds. I'm going to reset the soundboard.
This always happens. Sorry.
Try it again. No, quickly. Okay.
No.
It takes a minute.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So
Okay.
you should be able to hear us now. Sorry about that.
And try to play a clip so I can see if the audio is working. And this seems to be happening every other episode.
Yeah. We
Play
have
a
to
clip
figure
real quick?
out why.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's working. Thanks for bearing with us
Thank
there
you.
for a moment.
Thank you for your patience. Rafa loves when we have technical issues. So there you go, Rafa, just for you.
I'm asking just because Minister Amory, it was a little bit unclear. He wasn't able to say last week if the results would be binding. So can you say for sure that they are
Well, I can
constitutional
tell you
questions?
that Section 95 is a section of the Constitution that we've not tested before, and it does have two areas of jurisdiction that are joint. And if you read it, it says that the province shall make laws, which seems to imply that the province should take the lead on policies regarding agriculture and on policies regarding immigration. And the language that they use for the federal government is the federal government shall make laws from time to time. And so it does seem to me that Quebec is the only one that is exercising the spirit of what that meant, is that you have to have the provincial leadership role in ensuring that newcomers match the needs of the economy, and then the federal government ultimately determines citizenship, asylum seekers, and some of those other aspects. And so I would say that if there is any kind of constitutional discussion, I guess we can battle it out in the courts, but it's already been well established in Quebec since 1991 that they do have the right to do it, and we do too. When it comes to the other ones, those of course cannot be done unilaterally. If you look at the abolition of the Senate, which is one of the issues that's on the table, that would have to be done with an agreement, I believe, of all the provinces.
And pause it really quick. Yeah, and she doesn't actually address the question of independence on the ballot because it's not on the ballot. And I think she was intentionally kind of avoiding that. She is getting a lot of heat now for muddying the waters by putting multiple questions on this ballot. But you keep going.
Requires unanimous. There's different amending formulas. The other issues around asserting that provincial laws should take paramountcy over federal laws in our areas of jurisdiction, that would require the amending formula of 7 out of 10 provinces representing 50% of the population. Same with opting out of federal programs and receiving the money for it. That might be a negotiation that we can have as opposed to a constitutional amendment. And the appointment of judges. I believe that also would require all of the provinces to agree, and we're already hearing that other provinces are in agreement with us on that. So we want to move forward on some of the things that we heard during the Alberta Next panel, some of the ways to
Okay, you can leave it there. And I will say this, the 4 or 5 questions she put on a provincial level, those are things she should have kind of been doing already. And the national questions, I mean, Quebec's going to block most of those. I think there was 1 or 2 that they would be in alignment with, but they're going to ask for massive amounts of concessions for Quebec only. A lot of the political power in Canada is focused around Quebec, and the federal government loves that because it's all liberal voters, and it keeps Canada kind of within a monopoly of liberalism.
And also going back to you saying that there have been people voicing their opinions more and more after it was announced that the potential referendum question, well, not potential, the referendum question would be with others and then maybe muddled in with others during the October vote. Well, here we have an example from Alex McQuaig, I think, says some protesters voicing opposition to Premier Smith during Medicine Hat Town Hall Saturday. And I wanted to ask if anybody knows, because I was going to look it up before we started, and I have actually driven through Medicine Hat, but I've always wondered why it's called Medicine Hat. If anybody knows, let me know in the comments.
You were asking me, and I didn't know.
Yeah, because again, I have been to Alberta, and I did a whole what's it called? Road trip through Alberta with family members, and we did pass through there, and I remember thinking, what does that mean? And I never looked it up. So if you know, maybe we will all know today.
Okay.
Because it is an interesting name.
Well, and I'll say this particular clip came out just after our last episode or early the next day, and she was getting booed. There is a lot of pushback against kind of muddying the waters and putting all these questions together. Now, I'm more than willing to say I could be wrong, and maybe it won't muddy the waters, but I'm going to trust Keith Wilson's opinion, and I kind of want to wait to see what he comes out and says. But I'm definitely pushing back. I want the independence question to be alone on its own, and I think what she's trying to do is claw back power from the federal government and get carved out, much like Quebec has. But if that undermines the independence movement, it's not worth it. There's only one question that needs to be on that ballot because it kind of answers all the other 9 questions. The thing is, she's also trying to provide a safety net, and she wants more power for Alberta and more independence for Alberta on a national level.
That's quiet.
Brian, you can to me. We just asked.
Can pause it for a quick second. And again, this was right after the controversy of muddying the waters with multiple questions on the ballot. We're going to go back to the clip though. But these are people with the independence movement that are really in the know and they're voicing their opinion. Rather than kick them out of the room, she should have invited one of them on stage to ask the questions about the ballot. Maybe she doesn't want to be asked questions about that specific issue.
Sorry, I lost it.
Just found. Oh.
Were they MVP voters?
You clearly were hard to because I asked that you maintain property.
They look like NDP voters.
Yeah, maybe they are NDP voters, but there was somebody that said they got kicked out that did have an Alberta hat on that I was watching an interview with as well. Okay, you can leave it there. And let's go to one more clip and then we'll go to any comments that we have. So if you have any comments, leave them now. We're going to go through all of them in just a moment.
And more opinions from Laura Bagpuck. Hold on. From Laura Bagpuck.
And I'll say
Why
one
can't
more.
I say that name?
I'll say one more thing. I really want Danielle Smith to come out and kind of just address this thing head on about all these questions kind of being on the same ballot without kind of sidestepping it.
Mm-hmm. So it says, quote, Danielle Smith is losing control with this referendum plan. She's ill-prepared to deal with this crisis. She's invited the far right into her party, and now lunatics are trying to break up.
Well, and this is obviously a liberal opinion. Although she is losing a little bit of control with muddying the waters with these 9 questions all on the same ballot with the independence question. I think overall she has done a good job. Let's see what the Liberals say.
Danielle Smith, the Alberta Premier, appears to be losing control. She's introduced this ridiculous sort of multi-point referendum plan with multiple questions and multiple potential outcomes. She's ill-equipped and ill-prepared to deal with this crisis of her own making. And that's because she's gone out of her way to invite members of the far fringe right to be members of her government, to be
This isn't a crisis of our own making. This is a Canadian crisis. This is a crisis for Canada. Canada needs Alberta. Alberta does not need Canada. And there's a good chance Alberta is going to stand up once and for all. I mean, this thing has been going on for 100 years, since 1905. Every couple of generations, this kind of comes up. The last time it came up was under Justin Trudeau's father, primarily.
Members of her caucus, to be members of her cabinet, to be members of her general party. And so what's happening now is that these sort of far-right lunatics are doing everything they can to break up the country. And so she finds herself in a real conundrum. It's a disaster of her own making.
That girl needs more Botox. That was the same crazy girl we seen the other day that we're playing a clip of.
Yeah.
And they're really lambasting Albertans. And what do they think? They're going to talk shit, call them far-right lunatics, and then they're going to vote to stay part of Canada, vote to stay part of the country that's abusing them, the country that's taking all their remittance payments and all their money and then giving them a carbon tax and punishing them for drilling for their natural resources, which is supporting the entire country.
And it's always the same arguments that anybody that has a different opinion or maybe is telling the truth or telling it how a lot of people are seeing it is now far right. So that should stop being an insult. It should be a badge of honor, if anything.
Well, and I'll also say one more thing. The Liberals are taking a very hard-nosed approach. They don't want to hear what the problems Albertans have with the rest of Canada and the political situation that's going on about taxation without representation and a lot of the other issues. And I think Carney's sending that up intentionally, meaning he knows there's a national election before the Alberta independence election. Most likely, there's going to be a snap election called. And if he doesn't win a majority government, meaning if Carney only wins a minority, which I don't know, it's looking like he's going to get a majority at this point. But if he only maintains a minority, very likely he's going to keep that stance to intentionally push Alberta out of the country, so then he can call another snap election. And without Alberta there, he'll definitely win a majority government at that point. And maybe he can put legislation in to stop Quebec from leaving. They need those Quebec voters because if Quebec and Alberta leave, the country of Canada actually turns conservative, and the super country of Alberta will be super conservative.
But now we'll read your comments. Tal says, I'm already aware of most of what you're talking about right now, so I'm going to listen for a while, but thank you for being here. Lynn says, I believe Danielle Smith is a federalist. And again, I think most of her major plan is to put Alberta in the position that Quebec is and have maybe the concessions that Quebec has gotten. I don't think the federal government would be willing to do that. And everything up to this point and all the promises that have been made or all the fighting that is supposed to take place between the Alberta government with Danielle Smith and the federal government and Mark Carney has not happened yet. So
yeah, and I'm fine with that, her kind of asking those questions, but I want there to be absolute clarity on the issue. Meaning I want the Alberta independence issue to be on its own ballot, and I would prefer that question to be on the ballot first. But I guess she's going to push them all on October 19th. We'll see what happens, and I really don't like it at this point.
And Tal says, by the way, I had a longish post about what I thought about Daniel's, what Smith et al. Were doing with the 9-question referendum in the comment thread of our last upload. So yesterday we saw it, and I can try to find it, and then we'll bring it up in a bit.
Well, and
it's going to take me a while to find it.
And on our last live that we did all about Alberta independence, I really went hard on Danielle Smith, and I kind of flushed out that issue completely. I'm going to kind of wait to see what happens and see what Keith Wilson says here, but I'm still not a fan of having all these questions on that ballot. You only need one question, and that's the question of independence.
Alias says, speaking of China, we should refuse diplomatic ties with Beijing. No Alberta embassy in China, no Chinese embassy here. We should have diplomatic ties to Taiwan instead. Well, yeah. And I mean, that would send out a good sentiment. AOC wouldn't know where that is, but.
Well, and we also did a video about what happens to the Canadian economy if Alberta leaves. And in that video, we kind of talked about Alberta has good relationships with the United States under Donald Trump, and even under a new administration, I think they would be able to find a path there. But they want to align themselves with the United States because that's their biggest trading partner. The truth of the matter is that's every single province in Canada's biggest trading partner. Canada has tariffs province against province. They don't even know how to do proper interprovincial trade. So adopting good trade relations with the United States would be absolutely crucial. And part of that is to kind of reject China. We see what Donald Trump is doing with Mexico right now, and he asked them to put a 50% and a 100% tariff on a lot of Chinese goods coming into Mexico, and they did that. And in return, what Donald Trump is doing is $1 out of every $4 clawed back from China, he's now investing in Mexico. I think he would do something similar to Alberta.
And Remote Viewer says, they know every pew we have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even the ones you don't have, but just because you registered for the license, I mean, I guess it gets email pushed to everybody, but.
And even if you have a pew, you don't have a right to defend yourself in your own home. Absolutely insane. A lot of the gun laws they have in Canada when it comes to self-protection, you're just not allowed to use it for self-protection. That being said, they want to have even a bigger gun grab when a lot of people that live rurally absolutely need weapons to protect themselves from wild animals in their homes or for hunting.
Tal Talks says, Tal Talks says, just shared this to X again. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
We used to stream on X for a while, but then it would go haywire. I think it just couldn't withstand all 3 streams going out. We're also streaming right now on RUMBLE. If you have any spicy comments that you think YouTube sometimes censors your comments, unfortunately, so you can leave them there if you want.
And I will say we've just started doing these Alberta independent streams recently. I'm now doing twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. There seems to be enough new content, enough new articles, things kind of happening where I can make it happen. I do understand some of the information is a little bit repetitive, but we do appreciate everybody from Alberta kind of tuning in and supporting the movement overall.
But also outside of Alberta, because here in Mexico, for example, almost nobody knows that what's happening, what's going on in Alberta, why they want to separate, but then why they want their independence either. So I do think around the world, Alberta is in a very unique position to show that it can be done in a democratic way to separate. It would be one of the first times that a country democratically separates from its
In the modern era.
from its other country, I guess.
Yeah, well, what I always say is this completely changes the paradigm between the citizens and the elites of countries. It seems like the elites in a lot of these countries, whether it's in the EU, the UK, Australia, the elites are trying to take the country and the policies in a completely different direction than what the citizens are going, especially in the EU. I mean, they want World War III. What's going to happen then? Are they going to force conscript people to go to that war? If Alberta separates, it shows the people and the citizens can take back control and actually stand on their own 2 feet for independence. And I think you'll see an add-on effect of a lot of EU countries want to separate from the EU.
Mm-hmm. And J79 says, do not click on any of the links in the emails from the RCMP. I think you just delete them.
Yeah, I would know. I read the
text.
I read the email itself, but I never click on the links. Yeah. But I do want to see what they're saying because I talk about this shit all the time.
This stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Greg says, ignore the RCMP letters. I get them all the time.
Yeah, but I like to read them because I do like to talk about them because on Mondays and Wednesdays, we have an international audience. And I like to kind of talk about the gun grab and the different aspects of that in Canada. Australia is doing the exact same thing. So you're seeing these frameworks. When they work, they're repeated in other places. And when they don't work, they try to improve them and then grab the guns. The United States is the only place that is really respecting firearms rights at this point.
And RWCT says, may our Lord bless us all. I will pray for Eastern Canada, even though we are traitorous, separatist Yahtzees.
Well, and that's the thing. Part of the Albertan culture is Christianity, and that used to be part of the United States and Canadian culture in general, but it's losing that very quickly, especially with this mass immigration. If Alberta does have independence, I think Christianity is going to be a big part of that culture again.
And RWCTI also says, the nation of Alberta has the Votes by Clarity Act of 1998. Been waiting since the 70s for this. It's time.
Yeah, I think it's not only time. This is going to be your last real opportunity. I think Carney's aiming for a majority government. I think he's going to be willing to do whatever it takes to stop any independence movements in the future. But if this thing's already rolling by the time he's got a majority government, it's going to be a lot harder. This is also why I'm a little bit worried about this petition. I hope the petition is submitted before Carney wins a majority government or calls a snap election and then wins a majority, because I don't know what it means if Mark Carney gets a majority government, what kind of powers he has to kind of stop these.
And Lynn says, Danielle Smith was a leader of the Wild Rose Party, but abandoned it for personal political gains with Jim Prentice. Maybe she sees herself as Canada's future PM or Prime Minister. I trust based on actions, not words. And I think her maybe thinking she could get to that point, if that is what she's thinking, might be a little bit too much of a dream.
If she would firmly fall down on the side of independence, which she really was before all these 9 questions she's trying to put on the ballot with the independence question, but she really was kind of falling on the side of independence as much as you could as a national candidate and still stay part of the Conservative Party. Poilievre has made it clear he'll kick anybody out that is outwardly supporting the independence movement. That being said, if she falls on the side of independence, she had a good chance of winning a leadership race for the new country of Alberta. I don't know now because she is starting to muddy the waters.
And Tala Talks says that Conservative power squabble cost us 4 years of NDP rule.
Yeah.
And I think we will continue, especially now, to see those squabbles or see most of the people within the Conservative Party, just in general, either fall in line or still cross again, maybe.
Well, I say
across the floor.
A lot of Conservatives in Alberta may want to reconsider voting for Conservatives in the next election because the NDP could see a real uprise here. What you're seeing with the last politician that kind of crossed the aisle to the Liberal Party. And I think this question's being put to a lot of conservatives in Alberta. Their ridings are all for the independence movement, and they're asking these politicians, do you support the independence movement? The politician knows they'll be kicked out of the party if they support it. So they're in a position they can't say yes, they can't say no. So they're abandoning the party, going to the Liberal Party. I would also see this to be a real strategy for the NDP in the next election. If independence voters stay home and don't vote conservative, you can see an uprising of the NDP party in Alberta, and I don't want to see that again.
And Pete says, oh, thank you. Pete says Blackfoot word Samis, meaning medicine man's hat. Thank you for the clarification. And also,
I said I think it probably has something to do with a medicine man.
And also says hometown medicine hat, now a proud Calgarian. And also says far-right lunatics. Yeah, right. No lunacy in Eastern Canada. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
that's
and I'll
where all
say
the
the one
lunatics
thing,
are.
Alberta or Calgary's been in the news a lot lately. And man, I'm not liking a lot of the ways they're voting. They're extremely liberal for being inside of Alberta.
Lynn says, when Alberta is independent, we need to form a government with no Canadian provincial federal politicians in our government, grassroots movement with a fresh new pro-Alberta Republic government. And that's why I continue to say about basically all governments, that the career politicians that are just there for power grabs and to continue to try to find some new ways to make more money within and while they're in office and they're public officials, allegedly, but never look for the public, is why we need more and more regular people that have never wanted even a career in politics. I think those are the most trustworthy people.
Yeah, what I was saying is maybe get people that have never been involved in politics. Now, you're going to need some lawyers, accountants, and stuff like that for the nuts and bolts, but you're going to need to try something new. And Mario Newfall is somebody that we follow on X. He has a lot of good news, but he interviewed a gentleman from Cyprus that was a YouTuber and really created a campaign saying, I'm not a politician. I've never been a politician. And then he started educating himself and educating the general public on issues. And he's really changed the paradigm of how politicians can get elected within the EU outside of politics. That was very interesting, but I'm also very in favor of radical transparency in Alberta, meaning I think politicians should get paid a lot, but they should have to give up a lot of their basic rights, and they should have to have radical transparency, whether that's on their phones, emails, and other things. There has to be a level of transparency, but you're going to have to pay them well in order to give those kind of rights up. I think
privacy rights. I don't think like other actual rights.
Yeah, I'm talking about privacy rights. Yeah. Citizens need ultimate privacy rights. Politicians are the ones that need to get some of their privacy rights. I wouldn't say taken, but they should have to forfeit them for a time while they're in office, so the general public knows that they can trust them.
And we have another comment, but YouTube is being funny, so I'll just read it like this. 8 says, if Carney buys his majority, Canada is cooked and democracy is ended, I will say. Alberta independence is our only future.
Yeah, Alberta's independence right now is the only future, because I don't even think Mark Carney has to buy the majority. There's 3 other by-elections going down. They're all in Liberal ridings. He's probably just going to win it naturally. The Conservatives and the other parties are going to have to call a snap election before those 3 by-elections happen. The problem is Mark Carney looks like he's pulling ahead in the polls, not because of the economy or any real issues that are happening in Canada, but for 2 reasons: that the Alberta independence movement and Trump derangement syndrome, which is absolutely insane to me. These lemmings in Eastern Canada are willing to jump off the cliff with Mark Carney just to spite the independence movement and Trump.
And take the rest of Canada with them as they jump as well, even the ones that disagree, which is why exactly Alberta independence is the only option and sends the only message that is important to send. I think a lot of other Canadians that are also, but in other provinces that are also feeling the exact same way, but haven't had the chance or the ability, or because they have family or jobs or whatever, to either move to Alberta or do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, we moved from BC to Mexico because I lost all confidence in the federal government and people within BC to vote in their own interest and to vote for common sense. Right now, Alberta has a chance to vote for common sense permanently. At this point, if this independence movement doesn't go the way of independence, I've lost all hope in all of Canada. Alberta is giving me a kind of a second wind to really believe in Albertans. They're a different breed than the rest of Canada and Saskatchewan as well. And Saskatchewan really has a debt of gratitude to say to Alberta, because they're building the framework that's going to make the Saskatchewan independence movement a lot easier to do.
And Albertans are the only true patriots. They're the only ones that have been realizing how Canada has taken advantage not just of the province, but of all Canadians. And we're the only patriotic enough to actually do something about it and put words into motion.
Well, and Mark Carney is now federalizing Canada at an extreme rate. And if he gets a majority government, he's going to do it even more. So Alberta's going to lose more and more and more of its sovereignty. More regulations, more taxation is going to come. This is the opportunity. I think the one good thing that came from the Jibby Jab era, the Chucker protest, and a lot of the other things that happened over the last few years and the federal government overreaching, I think Albertans are wide awake right now, even the moderates and even the business class that typically wouldn't vote for this. I think they're going to come out and they're going to vote.
Tuna says politicians are servants, not rulers, and that's exactly what I was trying to say, so thank you. And Roland Chapin says Alberta independence all the way, and I would say the only way, honestly. And after living in BC and Vancouver and downtown Vancouver, which is even worse, even more so.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. Politicians are servants, and we need radical transparency in the system. If Alberta gets its independence, it's an opportunity to show the rest of the world how a politician should behave, what kind of transparency policies should be put in place, so we know we can trust the politicians there.
And Pete says, we don't smoke propaganda in Alberta. We don't take no trips on CBC. Even though a lot of people do continue to. And Vancouver was the perfect example of just completely propagandized and narrative-driven lemmings that jumped off the cliff to bring everybody else with them.
Well, and this is the good thing, and this is why we're constantly kind of profiling content creators. Content creators are the independent media, and a lot of them are in support of the independence movement. The mainstream media isn't. A lot of Albertans do watch independent media, but maybe they don't know where to go or to find a lot of good content creators. That's why we're
or information.
Yeah, that's why we're profiling people like The Fringe, people like Clyde Do Something, Marty Up North. It's because during the trucker convoy, when we first started covering that on our other channel, it was very hard to find where these protests were. The federal government was censoring this information. There was RCMP officers on rooftops taking pictures of everybody. It was really the beginning of censorship in Canada at an extreme level.
And thank you so much to JG98901 for the $1.99 super chat.
Oh,
so
thank
you so much.
We're
There
small-
is no message. I don't see any message, but thank you so much.
And we're a small channel and we rarely get super
Tiny
chats.
channel.
It really does help.
Yes. So thank you. And Suna says, especially in Ontario. I'd say especially everywhere.
Okay, let's read two more comments and then we'll get.
Oh, that was it.
Oh, that was it.
For now.
Perfect.
So let's move on to the next clip.
And if you do have more comments, we're going to read them periodically on our geopolitics show on Monday and Wednesday. We actually have sections like the US, China, India, and after each section, we typically read comments. Today, everything's Alberta and Canada, so we'll just choose a time and read them periodically.
Yes. So Juno News and another source of independent news, pretty good all around.
It's one of the best in Canada other than Rebel News.
But again, both do have their issues, I will say. Juno News says, quote, Premier Smith rejects claims that a fee for temporary residence is discriminatory, pointing out that other provinces also restrict their access to social services. She argues that Alberta's rapid population growth has strained healthcare and education without public debate. All over Canada too, but
some political analysts have called your proposed fee on non-permanent residents a, quote, head tax, and they argue that linking Alberta's budget pressures to immigration risks demonizing newcomers or discriminating against them. How do you respond to those concerns that this framing unfairly targets immigrants rather than addressing broader economic factors?
Well, I think people should look at the reality of what's happening in other jurisdictions. Ontario does not offer healthcare coverage for families of temporary foreign workers. Canada Health Act has no requirement for temporary residents. There was just a ruling on that, an affirmation on that last week. In Alberta, disability programs, like persons with developmental disabilities, FCHD and H, are already only accessible to permanent residents and citizens. So that is one part of our system that we have only made available to permanent residents.
And absolutely incredible reframing of the question and pointing out how other provinces in the East are already doing a lot of this stuff. An absolute master when it comes to this question. When we get to the Canadian section later, there's huge scandals when it comes to healthcare right now. There's a two-tiered healthcare system. Refugee immigrants get superior healthcare to Canadian citizens, yet Canadian citizens are the ones paying for it. And it's a perfect time for Danielle Smith to try to change the healthcare system within Alberta when there's such a large scandal on the national level.
Residents and citizens. So this would be an expansion to two of our most costly social services, which are our healthcare, education, and seniors programming. But again, I think we just need to look internationally at what is happening. In the UK, they're having a debate about whether to extend the period before you can receive social services from 5 years to 10 years. That's the debate that's happening in Europe. We have had in Canada, our population in the last 3 years has grown faster than literally anywhere in the world. I think the only place Alberta has not grown faster than is Sudan. And what was driving that in Sudan was the civil war. So to give you some idea just how extraordinary the changes have been in the last 3 years, to see the population of Canada go up by 6 million people. And we didn't have a public debate about that. No one asked us as provincial leaders. No one asked the public whether we wanted to throw out an immigration policy that had served us well for 40 years with an experiment on bringing in a massive number of temporary workers and students. No one asked anybody whether or not they approved that. So we're asking them now. Do we want to continue this, or do we want to try to go back to...
And again, this is absolutely masterful reframing. And when people from other provinces see this, that they wish they had a leader like this, they absolutely love this. The difference here is she's starting to talk right now about the 9 questions she wants to put on this ballot. And that's the thing. I agree with everything she's saying. I just don't want this put on the ballot with the independence movement question.
To the normal immigration policy that we had that served us so well for 40 years, where we give the priority to economic migrants, and those that want to stay, we find a pathway to permanent citizenship, or permanent residency, and then ultimately citizenship.
Yeah, and she made the reporter look like an absolute fool. But
because the question was clearly more propaganda than question, which is what they always do. And I will say, again, it's funny when
even if Canadians live on the East Coast and they're liberal, what she said makes absolute sense.
Yeah. And it's funny because I keep looking on X sometimes of Canadians that go to the US and end up having a great experience with healthcare, and then others in the insane part of Canada trying to still defend the healthcare system and say, oh, it's great, how dare you criticize, at least you get free
Some
healthcare.
political analysts
And it's
have
like, well,
called
yeah, do you want free healthcare that you can only access about a year later once either your bone has set the wrong way or your diagnosis of cancer got worse because you couldn't get to actual medical attention to a specialist in time? The reframing of, for example, healthcare is just insane to me. Also, as an immigrant to Canada, I immigrated to Canada 13 years ago, and yet I see all of the new immigrants and the new temporary workers, etc., get a lot of benefits and get looked after by both the federal government and provincial governments, but for example, I still don't have a citizenship. It's been 13 years for me, and I studied there, and I pay taxes there, and I worked there, and yet now I'm here.
Well, like I used to work in underground mining, oil, construction. I used to teach jiu-jitsu. I've always had very physical jobs. And my back started going out at a point about 8 to 10 years ago, and I started going to the walk-in clinic because you can't get a family doctor.
I never had a family doctor from the
walk-in clinic. I started asking for referrals for MRIs and other things. They don't know where to refer me because they're a walk-in clinic, but I need a referral. So I start getting all this thing, and at no point can they diagnose me for over 6 years, and I'm starting to become crippled. I can no longer do a lot of the physical jobs I did. All I could really do was security, and even security got very hard at the end because it was hard to stand for long periods of time.
Yeah, you were in incredible pain. Every time you stood up, you would like seize up because of the pain in your back.
As soon as we moved to Mexico, within seeing a doctor 2 days, diagnosed, had me on medication. My back doesn't hurt. I mean, it hurts very, very tiny bit, but I can do jujitsu now. I couldn't even walk. It was hard for me to even walk down the street. I definitely couldn't run.
And you used to teach jujitsu.
Yeah. And so like what I'm trying to say is the medical system in Mexico is just...
It's a split system. So it's half kind of more socialized medicine for whoever needs it, and then there's a private system. But even then, the costs for the private system and for insurance are insanely lower than, for example, even in the United States.
Well, and a lot of Canadians and Americans come down to
coming
Mexico,
to Mexico.
for dental and for medical.
Yeah.
And because they see so many patients here from the United States, when we're talking about dentistry, I mean, it's a very high level of service.
Yeah. And I mean, after, not to disclose too many costs or anything, but after all that, and after the diagnosis and having the checks and everything, it was about $220. And then we had insurance on top of it. So it was like $8 total, which is insane. Again, it's insane to compare it with in Canada. You'd have to take a trip somewhere to be able to even just get the diagnosis.
Well, and
So like $600 for a ticket to Mexico from Canada.
the free medical system in Canada isn't always free. I mean, depending on what kind of legislation they pass, in BC, you used to have to pay for it. I mean, I still have a $3,000 bill that I haven't paid from the BC government.
Maybe we shouldn't say that on screen.
Well, because then the law changed, and then now you don't have to pay for it, but it's always free healthcare, free healthcare. Well, it's not. It wasn't free healthcare in BC.
Yes, you had the stipend thing. I don't even remember what it's called, but
And at that time, when they wanted me to pay for it, I never even used it. By the time
and it didn't even work because you weren't referred and you weren't actually knowing what was happening. Okay, moving on. Moving on to another news that we kind of touched upon, which is Quebec now recently, and there's more and more indications that they may be the next ones, from Ellie Cantin-Nantel, quote, Quebec Separatist Party just won the riding of Chicoutimi. Sorry, don't know how to pronounce that. Quebec. Could Quebec separation happen before Alberta separation? I don't think before, but...
And I don't think so. I've been kind of looking into this, and it looks like the Separatist Party is definitely coming to power in Quebec. The problem is they came into power off of a lie. What they promised was we're going to have a separatist election within a year of being elected. And a new statement came out just today that I was seeing. He's saying, by 2030, we'll have a separatist election. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's let Alberta go first. And if our remittance, if our remittance payments and honeypot gets cut off from the federal government because Alberta's no longer going to pay it, well, then we'll separate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you can leave it there. I also want to talk about something else. The Quebec separatist movement is far different than BC, Saskatchewan, or Alberta. I don't think Quebec can actually stand on its own 2 feet, at least under the ideology they have now. What do I mean by that? They have a ton of natural gas, oil, and natural resources. They just refuse to access it. And they actually have the control to access it control to access those resources because they have a lot of power within Quebec, unlike Alberta. That being said, they prefer to buy all their oil from Alberta and not to drill for all their own oil. If they separate, they're going to have to start accessing their own natural resources. I don't know if ideologically the population is actually willing to do that. And
I got distracted.
They take more remittance payment. They take more money from the federal government than they actually give. I don't know if Quebec can actually stand on its own 2 feet. I'll support the independence movement if it does come up, but I am a realist. And also I'm a realist when I look at Alberta. Alberta has everything it needs to succeed.
Mm-hmm. And it might be a rude awakening for Quebec if they do. And first, when Alberta goes first, it will be, the rudest awakening for, I think, obviously the federal government, but also for Quebec.
Well, it's going to be a double.
And maybe it'll be a good awakening for people in Saskatchewan and at least northern and eastern BC. I think the West Coast is completely done for in BC.
And ultimately, I do want the best for Canada. And the best for Canada, I believe, is for Alberta to leave and then Quebec to leave. And then it turns Canada conservative, at least by the number of seats. And then it has the super conservative nation of Alberta, which they can make great trade relations with.
And it would also be, if Quebec separates after Alberta separates, it would also be a great examination and a great way to prove if a very socialist government works with what they would probably want to do in Quebec versus common sense, actual governance in Alberta.
Well, this is the thing. I think
it'll be a good contrast.
Quebec's extremely liberal. If they do separate from Canada, I think you're going to see conservative leadership come up. They're absolutely going to have to access their natural resources. I think you're going to see a complete flip in Quebec's sex ideology if they do separate. They're going to have to become.
It's pretty ingrained there for decades now. At
No,
least.
but something that's more ingrained in them is they're very, very prideful people. So they're not going to want to go back to Canada, and they're not going to want to fall back on the United States. They're going to want to stand on their own 2 feet. And at that point, I think they would actually access their natural resources. Right now, they want to block a freaking pipeline that Alberta wants to build, yet Quebec gets all their oil from Alberta.
But they also want to get oil from the Middle East.
Yeah.
Quebec does. Should I read comments or should we?
Yeah, let's read some comments.
Okay. Roland Chapin says APP has recommended terms for no more than 2 politicians and bureaucrats.
Oh, read that again.
APP, Alberta Prosperity Project, has recommended terms of no more than 2 years, I'm guessing, for politicians and bureaucrats.
Oh.
So the Alberta Prosperity Project?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just don't know what I think about that. I do like 4 years because it's long enough. When it comes to 4 year in Mexico here, we have 6 years. 6 years is too long. In 4 years, what you see, they start campaigning after 2. So if you had somebody only in there for 2, they would basically rule for a year and then they would start campaigning.
And also, like, it would also be a question, because I'm not sure, it would also be a question of if there's re-election or not, or is it kind of the parliamentary, I hope it's not kind of the parliamentary system that, for example, Canada has or
yeah, I think there's a lot to iron out there, and you're going to have to take a real look at the United States, Mexico, how the rest of Canada does it, the EU, and take what works and what doesn't work and why certain things work. I don't know if there's anywhere else that has 2-year terms.
I think some country in Latin America, I think, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Lynn says, John Bolton is excellent on independence. I watch his podcasts every day.
Who's that? John Bolton?
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably know him by face.
Maybe we can profile him.
Yeah.
Learn about him and then profile.
Doesn't he do U.S. politics, I think? Maybe she'll say.
I don't know. Harmony says, not only were there cameramen on the Parliament Hill roof, but also snipers. And in the protests we went to, and we even filmed them, it was, I mean, they looked like some kind of officers. Never saw actual arms, but
yeah, we went to the trucker protests in BC. They were going on all across Canada. The ones in BC didn't get as much national attention. We went to 2 or 3 different border crossing protests. They were much smaller, but even at these smaller protests, RCMP was on the roof. There was 2 other much larger protests. RCMP were on the ground there, but I was surprised to see RCMP
on the roofs when there were so few people, because the first day we went, there weren't that many people, and there were still, I mean, there were already people on the, RCMP on the roof.
Yeah, all the footage from that is on our Spanish channel, which used to be our English channel. That was our original channel, but when we moved to Mexico, our English content would literally get 1 or 2 views. It was impossible to get it out, so we separated the channels. But the original content of the trucker convoy, the march across Canada is on there as well. A lot of the stuff you did with
gender stuff and Billboard Chris and stuff, that's all in the Nat en tu idioma, which is linked down below. If you're interested, just go to the oldest videos first and you'll see all the English content. We're not good. We were not good at talking. We were not good on camera, but you can see the beginnings of Nat and the guy. Harmony also says that it's true that they know because I have a relative who is one of them that were snipers or people on the roofs.
The Canadian government, the amount of censorship that's going to go on with this independence movement, it's only going to ramp up.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
And it's going to be a lot of underhanded tactics they're going to bring in.
Harmony says, yes, Loom, AB, yes, John Bolton is excellent. There we go. Because we're replying to somebody else.
Yeah, and I'll kind of emphasize the point again. The censorship hasn't ramped up in Canada to the extreme it's going to, and that's why independent content creators are going to be so important going forward, especially independent content creators that live outside of the country. Clyde Do Something's one of those. We're one of those. But if Mark Carney gets a majority government, brings in these censorship laws, it's going to be absolutely insane what happens there. And I will say one other thing. We have got a couple comments with the videos we did on some content creators that live in BC. Just because a content creator doesn't live in Alberta, but if they support the independence movement, it's going to be important. Or if the content creator lives outside of the country, it's important to bring this message not just to Albertans, but to the rest of the world as well.
And the rest of Canada.
Yeah, we've seen what happened with the trucker convoy. The international media and international exposure put a lot of pressure on the Canadian government to kind of tap down their tactics. I can only imagine if it didn't get that kind of international exposure, the Canadian government would have gone even worse.
Yeah. Because it wasn't until it started making headline news that they were using heavy-handed police tactics and trampling on people with horses, on old ladies with horses that were already in a walker. That's still insane to me, because I watched it live. I wasn't there, but I watched it live while we were in BC, and yeah. But without that, and when I started seeing that on Mexican media and Latin American media and elsewhere, it was like, okay, well, maybe now they'll understand that what it looks like to the rest of the world. Because I had friends and family that kept telling me, I don't understand what's going on there. And then when the news came out of the treatment of the protesters and what the movement actually meant and how big it had gotten, then they were like, oh, okay, so people are not as happy in Canada as most of the world thinks they are.
Well, and again, independent content creators were crucial for that truckers convoy, because they were the national media within Canada was trying to build narratives. These independent content creators put on their own shows. They also went on national news in the United States and around the world to kind of say, no, they're not blocking all the roads. They're leaving one lane open for emergency vehicles. So it was hard to kind of build these narratives that the Canadian government was building, especially with the guy with the flag. They had a camera guy attached to him. Obviously, that was a setup at the time.
Allegedly, I'll say. Pete says, Alberta citizenship for Nat. Thank you. Thank you. I'm guessing that would also be faster, probably. If I could switch, like if I could transfer one to the other, eventually, if I ever do get one, I'd 100% do that. But I mean, my roots, and I am from Mexico. I'm from Mexico City, lived here my whole life until I moved to Canada 14 years ago. So, I mean, my roots are here. So I don't think I would
You're going to get no Alberta citizenship. Mark Carney is going to lock you up so quick as the censorship comes up.
Don't say that.
He's going to send Canadian special forces to Mexico to get you.
They're going to be all tiny Chinese people. Roland Chapin says, several 100,000 Canadians go to the USA for life-saving operations that they must pay for. And it's because, exactly, it's the only option. And if you don't have the money or you don't have the ability to get there, well, then good luck. Or there's MAID if you want to go down.
He said the United States, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of them come to Mexico as well. Because a lot of state-of-the-art surgeries aren't even available in the United States. They're only
allowed.
They're only available in Mexico with stem cell treatment, other things like this.
Mm-hmm. Roland Chapin says healthcare is broken in Canada, and yet so many very lefty liberals are so proud of it still. Again, I continue to see people in the comments trying to defend the Canadian healthcare system by saying, oh, but it's free, which it's not free. You pay outsized taxes for it, and it doesn't even work.
Yeah, but the propaganda arm of the Canadian government is not only strong internally into Canada with the billions they put into the CBC and other networks, but I would say it's even stronger internationally. We talk to a lot of international people, whether it's here in Mexico or on the show with our geopolitics, and Canada has really fooled the world to thinking they have the best healthcare. It's free healthcare. And then just any number of other things with immigration, because they rely on so heavy on increasing their GDP by flooding the country with immigrants. They make sure they have a good face of immigration to the rest of the world.
And that's the thing too. A lot of immigrants, and it's funny because again on X, they have bought ads on X from Immigration Canada. And I continue to see ads saying, go study in Canada. There's new high-paying jobs in Canada all the time. And I report them as misinformation because they are, because it's not true. Canada is not great. And I will continue, if I ever do have time to record in Spanish again, I do want to make kind of anti-Canadian propaganda to say, it's not what you think. People are leaving. You're going to spend all your savings to get there. And then it's going to be even worse because the cost of living and the lack of housing, you're not going to be able to really do much.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into a few more.
Because we have quite a few.
Okay, well, we'll get to them periodically.
Let me just read this.
But then highlight the last one you went to so we know where to start again.
I'll just read this last one from Pete. When waiting is the difference between life and death or peril, you go to the US.
Or you don't wait in Canada. It's the quickest healthcare system in the world,
Yeah.
right to MAID. Like, it's absolutely insane what that program's doing. And now that,
And the expansion of it too.
we talk about it a ton on this channel. We used to have a very large U.S. audience, and like the U.S. is starting to adopt these policies, especially the blue states.
Yeah.
Citizens need to be made aware in the United States what they're actually building with this MAID program.
And why they're doing it.
They're financially incentivized to get rid of citizens to lower the cost of healthcare, and then they're selling their organs and blood on the back end. It's absolutely insane.
And we have talked about it, but look it up if you don't believe us. But we'll probably continue to talk about it because it's insane.
Most of the audience is from Alberta today, so I think they probably
I'm sure
know
you'll
about it.
But if you don't know, MAID is medical assistance in dying, which is basically youth space in Asia. I can't say the full
It's
word
one of the
on
big
YouTube.
topics we cover, especially when we go to RUMBLE.
Yeah. But moving on, and if we're going to go kind of in a tangent, but just to relate it to Alberta as well. From Marian Alfo, quote, Mexican president, and this came out today, which I also
Yeah, and I brought this article up to tie this in back to the independence movement and Mark Carney. Once we talk about it, you kind of understand.
So, quote, Mexican President Sheinbaum stated in her morning press conference that her government is considering legal action against Elon Musk over his ex-post accusing her of being a puppet of drug cartels, which she is. Why do you keep losing time with BS when your country is under fire? Again, she has not fully stated what's going on in the country. They have not answered very important and pertinent questions about road blockages, about how many people have been ended, how many people have suffered, how many soldiers have been
She originally did answer it because she originally came out with statements saying everything's fine and nothing's happening. And then X was just flooded with people on the ground, the burning cities. And then every time she comes out with a statement, it's getting contradicted by X within minutes, and they're having side by sides. She doesn't like the fact that they can't build a firm narrative. And how this relates to the Alberta independence movement is Mark Carney's going to want to build a firm narrative, but independent content creators, and especially the platform X, is going to be crucially important to that movement if we want this thing to succeed. Governments around the world absolutely hate X because they're used to being able to build narratives through the mainstream media. X has completely now undermined this. Sheinbaum wants to take the strategy of suing Elon Musk. This is exactly what the EU is doing. This is exactly what the UK is doing. They don't like the fact they can't lie to their citizens in real time anymore and then get absolute compliance from them.
And with a bunch of other bills that have already been introduced or have already been passed in certain cases in Canada regarding freedom of speech and freedom of information and news, etc., it's even more worrying now that when they're already feeling like they're losing narrative, and like the Alberta independence got way bigger than I think they wanted it to. Don't doubt, and I don't doubt, that they will continue to try to pass these kinds of censorship laws and do more and more extreme things to silence the people. And that is why I know it always sounds weird when we say, oh, content creators and independent media, etc. But those are the only true bastions where you might be able to get information that would otherwise be censored. And within Canada, if it does get censored, then only the ones that were able to leave and escape and continue to talk will be the ones that will have to carry the torch.
Yeah, and like I said before, I think the snap election is definitely coming before the independence election. And right now, it looks like if that snap election is called, Mark Carney is probably going to get a majority government. I hate to say it, but if he does, there's 3 or 4 censorship bills literally waiting in the wings, and he's going to pass those almost immediately. He's going to want to try to ban X. He's going to want to try to bring in mass censorship. Specifically, he's going to want to bring it in quick order, even if it exposes them, because number one, he'll already have the majority government, but he's going to look at this Alberta independence movement as priority number 1. He needs to shut it down, and the only way he's going to have to shut it down is through absolute censorship.
And they already had a little kid, and the way they're going to go about it, which is how Australia, the UK, a bunch of other countries in Europe have been going about it, is through protecting kids and protecting women and protecting, etc., whatever rights. And they already had a kid stand up at a press conference and say, well, I think internet being not censored is not good. So they've already started with the narrative, and now this is just more excuses to push it even further.
Well, and I wouldn't, if Carney gets a majority government, I'm not only expecting him to bring in mass censorship, but he's going to want to bring a digital ID almost immediately. We've seen what's happening in the UK. You're having to use a digital ID to log on the internet because they want to make sure that you're of age. What they really want to do is see what kind of content you're looking at. This becomes
And who you are.
This becomes dangerously important when you're talking about the Canadian government, because they've already shown a willingness to cancel people's bank accounts and do any number of other things, but they're going to start targeting people within the Alberta independence movement, and only the people outside of the country have a little bit of immunity to the Canadian government's overreach.
Because then getting on a plane and setting foot in Canada or in Alberta while it's still Canada, would that be even safe for those that continue to speak out against
Well, this is why I'm not willing to go back to Canada right now. This is all that, I mean, not all that we talk about, but our primary focus of interest is the Alberta independence movement. Then once Saskatchewan builds up, we're going to be talking about that a lot as well. The Canadian government, I have to be on a blacklist or a hit list at this point. I have nothing good to say. Well, I have nothing good to say about them. I'm not going to shut my mouth. What happened with the jibby jab era, I didn't take those jibby jabs, but what happened with that era was a huge overreach. And then the truckers convoy, what that government did. I mean, I'm absolutely disgusted with the federal government, and that's why I already left. And this is why I support the Alberta independence movement with an absolute passion.
Let's continue to see the narrative pushes that the Canadian government is trying. From Kian Bexley, he says, this is BS, I will say. All you need to do is strike up a conversation with anyone in an elevator, on the train, or at the grocery store to know that these numbers aren't real. Liberals are not popular in Alberta, no matter what Western Standard tries to tell you. Just why? And Western Standard says, exclusive poll, Carney Liberals on the heels of Conservatives in Alberta.
Yeah,
and
but I will say this.
It doesn't super surprise me.
Well, I think this whole thing is a bunch of BS, but not just the Liberal side, the Conservative side as well. It's not to say Albertans aren't conservative. They're super conservative.
That's the thing.
Super conservative. They're not...
they're real conservative.
They're not willing to compromise their principles. A lot of them aren't supporting Poilievre because he's supporting National Canada, not the independence movement anymore. The Conservative vote's going to really suffer in this snap election. And that's why I think Mark Carney might get a majority government. So people in Alberta might reluctantly want to vote for their Conservative candidates to make sure Mark Carney doesn't get a majority and try to stop this independence vote from happening, because he's going to use every single power in the book he has, if he gets a majority, to stop this referendum.
And we have been seeing in our comments, and every time we talk about this, the narrative of traitors, of you don't know what you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera. And Ezra Levant, love him or hate him, it does have a good point here. From Rebel News, Ezra sounds off on the sneering condescension of anti-separatist elites in central Canada like Mark Carney.
Is they just can't help themselves. Even our mutual friend, Jason Kenney, he can't help himself. He talks about yahoos or blowhards, or he just can't help with the personal invective, which is that kind of stuff. It leaves a mark because it confirms the entire thesis that Central Canada it's not just the system isn't working. It's not working on purpose. There's a malice there. Like, did Mark Carney just accidentally undo Alberta, or was it on purpose? When you match it with a barrage of insults, people say, oh yeah, they actually hate us. Brexit, the sneer, there was a classism in the Remain side. Oh, you stupid, what they had a special insult for white working class, gammon. It's a British way of saying ham. They were basically calling people like a slab of bacon. Oh, you gammon. You don't know what's good for you. And I think it's that sneering condescension. You see it in about 90% of anti-separatist commentary online. Andrew Coyne's he's I think patient zero for this sneering approach. And I think, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. It's still 8 months away. But if you have the Stefan Dion's and the Rosemary Bartons and even Jason Kenney, he can't help himself sometimes. It reminds me of when he was criticizing the truckers. You know what? On referendum day, everyone gets just one vote. And I think 1 million Albertans are going to send a message that Mark Carney will never forget. And he's going to prick them into it.
Okay.
From your lips to God's ears, Ezra.
Okay, and I will say this, Rebel News is probably one of the most important outlets in Canada. Not that they say that I agree with them on everything, but when it comes to the Alberta independence movement, for an independent network in Canada, you have Juno News and Rebel News. They're really the big two that aren't just independent content creators, but have a a staff of content creators. Number one, they're the closest thing to independent mainstream, and they have a very large audience. And Rebel News is firmly on the side of independence, and they're firmly on that side for a specific reason. They know if these censorship bills come in, people like Ezra Levant can most likely be arrested. The entire Rebel News can be shut down if these censorship bills are passed under a majority government with Mark Carney. So I think Rebel News is seeing the Alberta independence movement. If Alberta does separate, I think they're going to move their headquarters to Alberta, because Alberta is somewhere they're going to respect freedom of speech and protect voices like Rebel News.
And also, I think the point he was making is very important too. He mentioned Brexit, but also MAGA. MAGA was the response to being ignored and being told to shut up and being told you're a white, dumb male, essentially, for 10 years. And then it started to become a movement, and then it became dangerous for the Democrats and those in the elites that thought that they would always have the power and control and the swamp that they had built for the longest time. I mean, today is this is just an extra aside. Today is the State of the Union address by Trump, and a bunch of Democrats, insane, lunatic Democrats, are saying that they're going to boycott the State of the Union. So there's going to be just mostly clapping in the room for Trump, because they were saying, don't clap for him, don't do this, don't do that, don't go. So if they're not there, then most of the people that are watching the State of the Union on the TV or online are just going to see people clapping for everything Trump has done.
This Trump derangement syndrome, Carney has been able to build this liberal nationalism under. It's really global nationalism. It's this really freakish thing that's happening in Canada. None of it's authentic. They used to hate the Canadian flag. Now they've adopted the Canadian flag as their symbol to unite against Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the one person that can literally save Canada with a good trade deal. You want good trade relations. Alberta has good trade relations. Pierre Poilievre is so scared to point out anything good Donald Trump does, because he thinks in order to win a national election, he has to have TDS, and the Conservatives have to have TDS, just
and
like the
pander
Liberals.
To the crazies. Pander to the elite.
It concede so much ground to the Liberals. Having a different position on Donald Trump, I don't know if it would work, but I would like to see it. And he doesn't have to agree with everything he does, but he should say, well, we do need a good trade relationship. They are our partner to the north. We don't have to battle. We don't have to keep our elbows up and battle with Donald Trump. We don't have to diversify our trade in order to get a trade deal. We need a trade deal now. Diversification of the economy is going to take decades in Canada, even if it's even possible. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would like to see.
And that doesn't mean he has to get on his knees and praise Trump for everything, but at least understand that the relationship is the most important one, instead of running over to China and essentially compromise your entire country to the enemy, in a way, of the country below you.
Well, I would like to see,
and your
I would like to see Poilievre make the pitch that we need Donald Trump and we need the United States right now for the future of Canada, and really have a different look than what this TDS Mark Carney is kind of doing. He's running Canada off a cliff, and if Poilievre can't really say, oh, you're running Canada off a cliff because you can't get a trade deal because of TDS, because
he has it too.
He pitches TDS not just as much, but just as well.
But also because Mark Carney is one of the architects and was one of those shadow figures in the background of the global elite network that was building and continuing with the plans that they thought they had solidified, 30, 40 years ago. And yet now he's realizing it's not so. And he has had to step into the limelight as prime minister, which I don't think he ever fully intended to do. But it was like a last ditch effort for Canada to be one of those countries that was able to sustain the insane global elite network that was continuing with the climate change and the transgenderism and the gender stuff and the human rights things, etc.
Yeah.
And the grasps for power. But let's see some of those insane people that are anti-separation.
This was
probably
a crazy
paid protesters.
This was a crazy protest. This is an anti-separation protest, but
in Calgary.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably, again, allegedly, maybe paid, because most of them don't seem very enthusiastic to be there. And when you contrast it with pro-separation people, it's night and day, and what the emotions and what the wanting to be there is. So YEG Wave says, seen from an anti-separation rally taking place in Calgary.
Alberta, You will stand up for the innocent by giving them your time and space to get what they need because you know
Canada is Alberta.
You will fight for public education founded in social and
Alberta.
They sound like a cult.
Oh,
Like a low effort cult too.
I don't know if it was a paid protest, but it does kind of reek of that because all the flags still had the creases in it and they weren't really that motivated. Then again, if you're paying somebody, maybe they're going to be more motivated than that. But
also to contrast, there was a convoy that started a few days ago from Calgary and Edmonton, both heading toward Red Deer and meeting at the center there and then continuing. So YG Wave says an Alberta Independence convoy was seen on the QE2 heading toward Red Deer from Calgary.
yeah, and it's fantastic to kind of see this. And
it harkens back to...
Well, yeah, and things like this really go well for clips. Other shows can show that this is a grassroots movement, and it harkens back to the truckers' protest in Canada, which was one of the largest peaceful protests in modern world history.
And most effective, I would say, in a way.
Well, there's a reason
for an international audience.
There is a reason why all of these other countries tried to emulate what the truckers' protest did after that.
I want to get copyrighted, but there we go. That's a lot of cars because it continues down a ways. I hit the mic. Sorry.
Yeah, and this was just good to see. And then there was clips coming out of when everybody actually got there, and it was a lot of people, which was also good to see. There was a clip that we showed on yesterday's show. I almost wanted to show it again, but it was of snowbirds from Alberta that stayed down in Arizona, and they had over 300 people in that line.
The non-insane ones that did not buy the CBC propaganda that Mexico is less dangerous than the United States because the United States has Trump, so now go to Mexico and have cars exploded right in front of you.
Yeah.
Which is insane. But
that was part of another crazy thing. The Canadian government was promoting, don't go to the U.S., it's dangerous, go to Mexico, and now look what happened. And we're going to show in a little bit some clips of the U.S. reaction of
what's going on in Mexico?
Well, not only what's going on in Mexico, but their reaction if anything happens to their citizens. And then there's Canadian officials, and it's just like an abandonment of their citizens within Mexico.
Mm-hmm. And just one last clip from that one, because it gives a bit of hope as well from John Alberta Patriot. Says, quote, young Albertans are starting to speak up. And the message was clear after a convoy of 200 to 300 vehicles paraded through Red Deer on February 21st. Many people gathered along Highway 2 and started to talk to youth, especially, which I think have been missing a bit from the conversation.
Hey, I like your flags.
Thank you.
Yeah, where'd you guys come from?
Calgary.
Calgary.
Yes, sir.
Nice. You look a little bit cold.
I'm a little cold. I got a little cold on the bridge earlier. I'm warmed up now, warming up. But
well, you got to wear bibs like this.
Yeah, I know. I left my gloves freaking Calgary, so I'm like,
I know.
Well, yeah.
Well,
I think I know you. Thank you. Like you're on Facebook. You in Edmonton, right?
I get around. I'm John from Alberta.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I recognize your face.
I have a YouTube channel.
Yeah. There you go.
It's called Talking to Albertans.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know it. I know it.
Are you guys together?
Yeah, we're brothers. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm 20. He's 18.
Okay. Well, you can vote.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah.
We can be canvassers. Both canvassers.
Yeah.
So it's. Yeah.
Okay.
We need 2 more young people like us canvassing.
Right. How many signatures do you think you guys have personally got?
Personally, we've only just started. I've gotten like probably 30.
I've got like 35, I think.
30, 35. But this is like we got our badges a week ago or something.
Okay.
And we work long hours, so it's only weekends for us that we can.
Yeah.
So
well, if every canvasser gets 100 to 150, we get over 1 million easy.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
No, from what I'm seeing, because I know so many people that want to sign haven't gotten to sign yet. Like,
yeah.
Of relatives, family, friends, and like the majority, they're the silent majority, right? They don't go to town hall events. They haven't signed yet. They're just. It's kind of slow moving, but the majority, right?
Yeah.
They'll be woken up and motivated.
Yeah. Have you guys set up in any creative locations?
Just once, one last weekend near our house. So right on near Deerfoot City, Calgary.
Okay.
But we're gonna be doing it once it warms up next Chinook. We're gonna be back out there and like
back out there.
Bang. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys rock. Like you're true Alberta Patriots right here.
Yeah. Oh, thank God. I mean, it's our future. I'm always surprised when it's older people.
And you can leave
Exactly. It's the young people's future. And I do think it is important to see more and more young faces, because we were talking about the snowbirds in Arizona that were smart enough not to come to Mexico. But the youth, I think the voice of the actual youth who will be most impacted by this and who will probably benefit the most from separating from Canada, because Canada has stolen their future away. Again, one of the reasons why I left, even though I thought my future was going to be there, is because of this. And I think just voices and faces, and for them to start speaking up, and it might not be in their, they might not think it's in their best interest, but in the end, they will and might be able to make history as young people.
Well, it's very interesting how many older people are extremely motivated. We get a ton of comments in our comment section saying, I'm 70, I'm 60, 70, or 80 years old.
Not that you're old, but.
And I'm not, no, well, they're saying it. They're saying I'm 60, 70, and 80 years old, and I'm not going to really see the fruits of this independence movement, but I'm completely motivated and I'm canvassing right now. It's the young people that we want to build a future for. And it's good to see when young people like this are coming out, even though they have full-time jobs, they're still doing this on the side. And that motivates other young people to kind of come out, and it creates an energy within the youth to come out and speak out, because it's the youth that's very often on social media.
And also to make history. They have that opportunity to make a country, literally. How often can you do that? Especially within your lifetime.
Well,
and then be able to reap at least some of the benefits from doing it. From the labor.
Well, not only to make your own country, but to break free from a country that's treated you like the doormat of Canada for far too long, well over 100 years now, from the founding of the country.
But also stolen your future.
Yeah.
And that of all the other young Canadians that I'm sure would want to move to Alberta.
Let's get some comments if we can.
Steve Surfaro.
Oh, good to see you,
Steve Surfaro says, not the voice of reason. Thank you. You have to take a trip to get a diagnosis. Exactly.
Oh, and he said that on our most recent video, so thank you.
We were joking because it originally came out because we were doing a lot of coverage on Candace Owens, and I kept saying, she's insane, stop listening to her, this is sounding like a cult, and she's going after a widow, she shouldn't be doing this is anti-God, anti-faith, anti-everything, and you were trying to defend her a little bit, at least in the beginning.
Not more than I was firmly on Candace Owens'
and
side
I said
in the
I was
beginning.
the voice of reason.
We rarely disagree on that subject. We did disagree. I eventually came over to her side, and I realized there was nothing kind of there.
And I kept saying, I'm the voice of reason, listen to me. Harmony says, if we have a very conscious or pure mind, this is the best tool for health and well-being. That too.
Yeah.
And Harmony says, that is a highly conscious woman. I don't know. Am I highly conscious? He always calls me an idiot.
Or in the morning, she's not conscious. And she's almost impossible to wake up.
Because I stay up around really late to be able to edit and do
you are
other
a
stuff.
heavy sleeper. I can literally shake you, open your eyelids, and you will not wake up.
No, since I was little, I've had a really hard time waking up in the morning. And that is why I was able to choose a lot of jobs where I was able to work at night.
Yeah.
And I would just work night shifts, like 12-hour night shifts, so I could use the time when I'm most awake.
Yeah. Well, I got you a job with the Teamsters with the film industry for a while, and that was all night. So you love that job.
I chose all nights. And then I worked at 2 high schools where I was able to do a lot of the night activities instead with the children. Suna says, false, Quebec would rather get oil from Saudi Arabia over Alberta oil, and they have started to try. Now, Harmony, why are we being so nice? Harmony says, I see such sweetness in her. I don't like to read all positive comments about me, but you all sent them.
Try living with her.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I do eat a lot of sugar, which I shouldn't. So maybe that's where it comes from. Pete says, Suna definitely has a point about, what did Suna say? Oh, the Quebec wants oil from...
Yeah.
From Saudi Arabia. Roland Chapin says Northern BC, 37.
Well, but it's even more crazy because a lot of people don't know the amount of natural resources Quebec has. It's just absolutely unwilling to access them.
Roland Chapin says Northern BC, 37% independence at their first meeting. Again, not surprised from having gone and visited outside of the insanity that is downtown and just Vancouver in general and Victoria. It's very understandable that basically just the top and side part of BC could just become something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And northern BC, I think, oh God, what is it? Prince Rupert? I think they have another major port after Vancouver. The northern port is the one Alberta would probably want to access because they're going to have a lot of alignment ideologically with northern and interior of BC. It's Vancouver and that
the liberal West Coast elite.
The coastal elites right by the U.S.
Yes. Suna says, I'm right by the ocean. Just throw them off into the ocean. Suna says, why do you think they say no to a pipeline across Canada for the past 10 years? Well, they want to buy oil from somewhere else.
Well, also, they're getting so much remittance from Alberta. They're like, we don't need to access our own natural resources. We'll just keep letting Alberta float our economy for us.
And go find it elsewhere as well.
Yeah, that's Quebec.
Harmony says, I find we need to learn much more about history and geopolitics. I think everybody is well served with that. And I always say, both in Spanish and in English, I know less than I know more. And I'm not afraid to admit that I do still want to learn and a lot of things. And everybody should use more critical thinking and discernment just in general.
Well, I was never really political. I think I was naturally kind of conservative, but not really political. And I didn't question a lot until you came along and she red-pilled me hard. And then
a lot of people think it was the other way around, but no.
And then the Canadian government red-pilled me with the jibby jab era, the lockdowns, the truck, like you name it. The combination of her, Donald Trump, and the Canadian government. I started my own political show because of it.
Pete says, problem with buying oil instead of developing your own gas. One is money out, the other is money in.
Yeah. And another thing is, there's talk that, well, Alberta oil costs a lot more to develop, $50 or $60 a barrel. It can be up to $60 or $70 a barrel if you're putting carbon taxes on it. How are you supposed to compete on an international market? You're literally hamstringing yourself.
Roland Chapin says, or corrects himself, says, I meant 2 terms of a 4-year term.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That makes more sense.
That makes a lot more sense to me.
And Ron from Follow the Bradleys Fund,
Oh,
hello,
good to see you.
How are you? Says, hope you're all great. Are you going to pay attention to the U.S. State of the Union tonight? Yes, we will watch it and probably talk about it tomorrow. On Wednesdays, we will now be doing more actual geopolitics. And then, when was it?
Monday.
He made the schedule. I'm
Monday
still
and Wednesdays is international geopolitics with a small section about the Alberta independence movement. Tuesdays and Fridays are going to be all about the Alberta independence movement and all the updates.
And then Suna, before Roll corrected the 2-year, 4-year things, says 2 years will keep Alberta on its toes when it comes to politics. Hopefully they'd be less polarized, at least initially. And I think they would be able to maintain less polarization that there is in Canada right now and in the U.S.
Yeah, like with 2-year terms, I know it's 4-year terms we're talking now, so I think that's much better.
With re-elections.
I really like populism. I consider myself a populist, and I usually support populist candidates. But with 2-year terms, it's almost too much populism because they're literally running the election 1 year into their term, and they're making all kinds of promises. And that's, I think I would be fearful of developing a welfare state at that point with only 2-year terms. So 4-year terms is much better.
And Ron says, I like Michael Bolton. That's the singer, but I think people were recommending, hold on.
I was watching a meme of
John
Michael Bolton the other day.
John
John Bolton.
Yeah. People recommend him, John Bolton, for Alberta Independence Info, but I don't know who is Michael
There's
Bolton?
another John Bolton in the States who I think I don't like. I think I don't like. No, he's with Inside the Administration. He doesn't have a podcast. And yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the John Bolton that supports the independence movement, but I'll look him up.
Yes. Harmony says they could stand on their feet. That is the Parti Québécois, but they don't want to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But
they decided not to.
But if they separate from Canada, there's a good chance that they will. They have all the natural resources, then they have everything they need to succeed that accepts the ideology. And that's the big difference between Alberta and Quebec is ideology. That's why it would be an absolute fantastic experiment, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Steve Zafaro says unlimited fuel plus natural cooling equals Alberta is our new AI data center complex for the U.S. I mean, they could get paid good money, but it's a lot of resource and space.
Well, they're already starting to build data centers there. I was watching it
in Alberta.
In Alberta, yeah, I was watching something about it, and it's the same reason Polyev actually made a good point about natural gas. It's much cheaper to develop and put onto a ship because of the cold weather. You need colder temperatures. Colder temperatures actually help develop natural gas a lot better. That's why putting a natural gas port within Canada, it was a really good idea. The Liberals just don't want to develop that idea.
And Al Norman says John Bolton is from Calgary. That not Michael Bolton and not the other
it's
U.S.
definitely a different John Bolton.
John Bolton.
The John Bolton in the States I don't like, but he's not a content creator. He's within the different administrations.
We'll check him out and maybe do a thing. Pete says, enjoyed your Mexico content the other day on your English stream. Very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. And we did it because we were from Mexico. And
we are here.
Yeah. We actually did a guest appearance on somebody else's.
Thank you so much to Polly the Latino slant. Thank you so much for having us on yesterday to talk about that. I think we were a bit too intense because we were just coming off of our stream from talking the whole time about it. But
we're very geopolitical, and I'm very. I think I'm very dry, and I know a lot of facts.
Serious sometimes.
So when they ask a question, I start talking about 1 out of every 4 U.S. dollars gets redeveloped in Mexico, and he's more of a I'd say entertainment culture stream. And I don't like doing guest appearances. I'm not good. I'm very awkward on them. When it's my own show, I don't mind just going off the cuff, but on somebody else's show, I'm just uncomfortable. You're much better because you go on WDW Pro every 2 weeks.
I do go talk about entertainment and news on WDW Pro this Thursday as well. So in 2 days, you can see me there, 12 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah,
I think.
Let's do a couple more comments, and then we'll start going into some Canadian Alberta news.
So we might have to do more than a few.
No.
Okay.
2, 3 more, and then we'll go.
3 more? Do you know how many we have? Hold on. Pete says Bolton is a former broadcaster, well-spoken, smart, full on independence. So then we will definitely.
We're definitely checking him out, and if I do like him, if the audience likes him, I'm probably gonna like him. We'll probably profile him tonight. We're gonna shoot something about the Fringe, and we have the biggest.
The unacceptable Fringe.
The unacceptable Fringe. We have the biggest crossover audience with him, and he's firmly on the side of the Alberta independence movement. Yeah. A lot of these
which is hard to find.
A lot of these content creators aren't, especially if they're not in Alberta. I still profile them because I want to push them in the direction of Alberta independence, and I think they're going to be forced to choose a side soon here. So I'm hoping they choose the side of independence.
And Tal says, Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, is a true modern superhero. And I had the honor of working with him. I helped design his website, filmed a few things for him and with him. Then he started having to go travel all over the place. And then we started other jobs. So unfortunately, we weren't able to continue. But we have been trying to coordinate an interview with him for the past like a year now.
Yeah, he's busy now. But
he's always elsewhere busy doing this, doing that.
After the truckers convoy and the march across Canada, that was one of the first things we did as well.
Niall says, yes.
When you started working with him, like nobody knew who he was.
No, he was just in Vancouver.
He was literally on the corner by our house.
Yeah.
And so that's when we knew who he was. And he did a really, really small interview. Yeah. And they're like, oh, I think I want to go work with him. And we did, and he needed a website. So it worked out well for everybody.
Yeah, I ran up to him and said, oh, I saw in an interview. I don't even remember who interviewed him. But I said, I saw you on an interview. And you said you were like here in the corner. And I saw yesterday you said you needed a website. I can help you build one. And then that's how we started talking. Lyle says, yes, the healthcare in Alberta is far from the best. And it's because of the system as well.
Well, it's a lot of immigration.
Resources.
We're about to go into a lot of controversies with what's happening with the Canadian healthcare system and immigration. There's literally a 2-tier healthcare system where refugees are getting better healthcare, like not just better healthcare, but far, far superior healthcare and much more wide-reaching as far as hearing, eyesight, home healthcare as well than Canadian citizens get, and Canadian citizens are the ones paying for it.
Harmony says, don't forget to press the like button, folks. Thank you so much. And Lyle says, and subscribe too. Thank you so much. We always forget to say it. I mean, I guess we have it here in the corner somewhere, but
we are a small channel, and every subscription really does help at this point. Yes. We just reached monetization. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge goal for us. It actually allows us to keep kind of doing what we're doing.
And Roland Chapin says, as a third-generation Albertan, thank you for your help. Albertans, you are awesome.
Yeah, and I hope more people get on board, and that's why I'm profiling not just content creators that are firmly on the side of Alberta independence, but also ones that kind of give lip service. You can tell they want to go there, but they're scared because they're scared of censorship of the Canadian government, and they're also scared of losing their national audience, which they've built.
Okay. I guess now we're going to Canada?
Yeah, let's continue here. You don't need to push the button. We're just going to the news.
Well, because I like to know where we are. Because now I have to find the next story. There we go. From Juno News, quote, conservatives accuse liberals of spending billions on bogus refugee claims while Canadians lack healthcare and call for prioritizing citizens.
Yeah, and this is
should not be controversial.
And this is what Danielle Smith was kind of talking about in some of the clips, but it's becoming a big scandal. I think we have 2 or 3 different clips from different politicians talking about this issue here. And the Conservatives are really trying to push this point right now because the Liberals are trying to push through a budget right now. So they want them to make concessions on this particular issue.
The Liberals have enabled hundreds of thousands of bogus refugee claims. Liberals' failures on immigration like this one means billions of tax dollars have been spent on hotels and social welfare for false refugee claimants. All while Canadians struggle to access health care and while legitimate refugees languish. This has to stop. Will the Liberals support our constructive motion to restore fairness and prioritize Canadians who pay for the health care system over fake refugees?
And it's great the way that they're talking now. Fake refugees. Like, who's bringing in this kind of political talk into the House in Canada? This is an influence from Donald Trump without a doubt, but it gets the point across to regular Canadians, especially when you make clips like this. The House of Commons used to be so dry, so it's hard to get regular citizens interested and involved.
Immigration, refugees, and citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the member to this important discussion. We have already introduced and made changes to the interim federal health program that will considerably reduce the costs. We are also making significant changes and have introduced C-12, which will curb the misuse of asylum. We will control costs, and we will truly protect those that are vulnerable in line with our international and humanitarian obligations.
Oh my God.
The honourable member for...
We're going to protect those. We're going to sincerely protect those who are vulnerable. Start with protecting the Canadian citizens and the future of Canada rather than giving all your money to these frivolous programs and other countries. We're going to get into that too. There was another $2 billion today earmarked for Ukraine.
For Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, the Liberals haven't been able to get hundreds of millions of dollars worth of pandemic scam fraud returned to them. So I highly doubt they'll be able to get fake refugees on deportation orders to pay back their health care. Mr. Speaker, this is something that needs to end. I will ask the minister again. This is a common sense motion. Literally everybody agrees with it. Will the minister support our constructive motion to ensure that Canadians who pay for our health system are given better access than fake refugees?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, to keep our program sustainable, we have and are making measured changes to the health coverage. We've already introduced copay to the system. We are already curbing the misuse. We've introduced a lot of integrity measures. We have C-12 that is currently in front of us, and thank you for the Conservatives for supporting that. That will reduce also misuse of the system. We also have international and obligations that Canada will continue to honor, particularly for those that are in need, and most of them are children.
Okay, stop it there. And
bring in the children.
International obligations. Canada's falling off a freaking cliff, and the amount of money they have earmarked to go to other countries right now is absolutely insane. Donald Trump has done the exact opposite with USAID. That's what Canada needs to do now more than ever. And like, this is a common sense bill, but it's really being highlighted on the Alberta front, but now it's being highlighted on the national front by all kinds of politicians. This is becoming a big issue over the next few days, I think, because of the budget.
But also Conservative MP Dan Mazier says, quote, for decades, Liberal and NDP politicians have warned Canadians about the dangers of a two-tier healthcare system. One that kind of works, like in Mexico, but whatever.
Well, no, and this is not the normal two-tier healthcare system. And that from this clip is where I started kind of doing my research. And the two-tier healthcare system they're talking.
I know, but yeah. What they usually complain about is a model kind of like the one Mexico has, where you can either pay private or go to.
Yeah, but that's not what they're planning. That's not what they're trying to frame this as anymore.
I know.
For decades, the Liberal and NDP politicians have warned Canadians about the dangers of a two-tier healthcare system. This month, we learned that there is a two-tier healthcare system now in Canada. One tier for the people who've paid into this country their whole lives, and a better tier for those who haven't, including those who filed fake refugee claims. It's called the Interim Federal Health Program. This program was designed to provide health care to genuine refugees who were fleeing prosecution, but now it's being exploited by bogus asylum claimants. In 2016, the Liberals expanded the program to give supplemental health benefits to asylum seekers. According to the government, these deluxe health benefits include vision care, counseling, assisted devices, home visits, nursing homes, transportation, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and translation services.
And pause it. And a lot of those services you cannot get under national Canadian healthcare. I couldn't even get a family doctor for
I never had one in the 13 and a half years I lived there.
The amount of things I got rejected for under the Canadian healthcare system, it's just it's insane, that list that he just read off. A lot of people think when they think about free Canadian healthcare, all those things are included. That's not the case.
Not basic emergency services. These are deluxe health benefits that millions of Canadians pay out of the pocket or earn through their workplace. The minute someone files an asylum claim in Canada, they receive all these benefits automatically. But that's not the most troubling part. According to the Immigration Department's website, it states that this program covers individuals if their claim for refugee protection has been rejected by the Refugee Board.
And
rejected.
And we've showed in the past under a lot of videos, there's a complete education program. So these refugees can take full advantage of the system. So they're getting tens of thousands of dollars. They fully access every resource that's available within the medical system. So it's not just like when a Canadian citizen gets free healthcare, but he never actually uses it. They're not only encouraged, they make sure that they actually use it, that the more refugees that go to this program, the easier it is for the Liberals to, number one, justify it. But then there's all kinds of corruption kind of built into these systems.
Not pending, not under review. Rejected. Vision care, counseling, home care, physiotherapy, speech therapy, all of it. Meanwhile, Canadians who have paid into the healthcare system their entire lives are on wait lists. Genuine refugees also on these wait lists seeking the healthcare they deserve. But they are both waiting for the care in the same line as rejected asylum claimants that only add to the backlog and use the public resources. There were 100,000 Canadians who died waiting for healthcare since 2018. And because of a Conservative-led investigation at the Health Committee, the Parliamentary Budget Officer revealed that the cost of the interim federal health program will cost Canadians over $1.5 billion by the year 2030. That's up from $66 million.
And he's saying that they're still entitled to all these benefits even after they've been rejected. What they need to do is spend that money that they're trying to give to these refugees for free and send them back. They've already been rejected at that point. It's time to send them back.
Decade ago. Interim is supposed to be temporary, but there is nothing temporary about the interim federal health program anymore. It has become a permanent, expanding entitlement for those who was never designed to help.
And also the not believing, like a lot of Liberals not believing that any refugee claims could be fake or that people could be trying to maybe take advantage of your country because they see, and this is what's most infuriating, it's the bigotry of low expectations. So they see people that are oppressed according to them or below them, honestly, that is how they see them, and say, oh, but they could never be smart enough to take advantage of these kinds of programs. So of course they're all telling the truth and they're all actual refugees, when no, people take advantage of especially these kinds of programs all the time.
Well, especially now, I mean, every other Western country is just being flooded and almost colonized by a massive influx of legal and illegal immigrants, except the United States. The United States is now stopping this. They have a program where they give $2,500 to anybody that's a illegal immigrant that goes to an airport, and then they, on top of that, give them a free airline ticket back to their home country or any other country that will accept them, like Canada, and send them there. So there's a huge influx of illegal immigrants that came in through the southern border in the United States. Now, understanding Canada is pretty much the only country left to go, or it's the easiest country to access from the United States. It's the largest unprotected border, and the United States is literally giving out free plane tickets and $2,500 if you want to claim refugee status in Canada.
And also the Liberals continue with their whole budget issues, which they've had for the longest time. Jasmine Lane says the Liberal Finance Minister will not say whether he believes the budget will pass tomorrow. Champagne.
And that's why all of these healthcare issues and illegal immigration is coming up, and why we're funding these refugees. A lot of these programs are being questioned right now because the vote on the budget is tomorrow.
Conservative decided to add a bit more. Listen, this is a minority parliament. What matters is that we get the budget moving, and that's what we'll do.
Are you expecting that it will pass tomorrow?
Well, it's not me. Canadians expect that because there's a lot of measures that Canadians need. I mean, this is a special time in our nation history, and I want everyone to understand that, we put every effort to pass the budget as quickly as possible. We obviously need the opposition, and that's why we made some compromise in the national interest, I would say.
intelligence OpenAI sont ici aujourd'hui. Si vous voulez entendre de leur part, qu'est-ce que vous
Okay, you can leave it there. The rest is in French. And it's going to be very interesting if this budget actually passes. Why? A lot of people, there's literally billions of dollars earmarked for foreign countries and foreign charities, NGOs, as well as a lot of pork spending with inside Canada that should be cut. The rumor is Mark Carney wants to sabotage this budget, put something forward that the Conservatives and the other parties can't vote for. This would give him an excuse to call an election if he wants. He seems to be pulling away in the polls right now because of Trump derangement syndrome and the Alberta independence movement. He thinks this now is the right time to call an election. He knows he can pit Poilievre and the national conservatives against the independent conservatives. So I'm going to be watching this budget pretty closely to see how the conservatives actually vote. They might be so scared of a snap election, they may just vote this through, and they shouldn't.
Speaking of Trump derangement syndrome, one of the worst ones that's now come out to basically just tell the truth about himself and many others from Mark Nixon, quote, Liberals, the self-proclaimed champions of the working class, David Earl, just announced that Liberals represent the wealthy and educated, an incredible rebrand.
Well, and this is the guy that said Jamal Giovanni is not good looking enough to be prime minister or to run in politics. It was an absolutely ridiculous statement. But since he's made that statement, he's made a number of other bad statements, and we've been profiling him quite a lot. He's a liberal commentator.
I think here's the deal. I think that Liberal Party has become the party of educated and affluent people. And if you're working class, you're more likely to gravitate toward either the NDP or the Conservatives than you are to gravitate toward the Liberals. And we don't seem to those people like we understand them, except our professed purpose is to help them. We see ourselves.
Again, it's putting the oppressed into a class, or those that are too dumb to understand what you're actually trying to say, and making them as inferior, like they don't know anything.
As the party that's in politics to help those people, and they do not see us that way. They see us as, and it's actually affluent people that are more likely to see the Liberal Party as the party that they'd like to have in office. So that makes you look in the mirror and say, what the hell is going on? I think here's the deal.
It should make you look in the mirror. I mean, the Democrats have still not learned their lesson that they became the party of the elites, and then they also betrayed the elites.
Wait, like, I just don't understand this. I understand what he's saying is absolutely true, but our professed interest is to help those people. That's our mission.
Tax them all.
What's happening is the working class is building the country. They're getting paid, and then you're taxing them to death, taking every dime away from them, saying, oh, we got to take this money to help you. What you're doing is lining your own pockets where you're professing to help people so you can take their money through unreasonable taxes at this point. Mm-hmm. And especially in Alberta, where you get taxation without representation.
And the bane of everybody's existence from Mark Nixon, quote, almost 1 year into Mark Carney's term, and he has failed to get a deal with the U.S. because he doesn't want to. He campaigned that he was the only one that can negotiate a win with Donald Trump. He's done the exact opposite of that in this past year.
The tariff regime down in the States, and how do you think it's going to affect the CUSMA deal?
Well, Mark Carney promised Canadians. He didn't just make a promise when he said this. He made it the signature campaign promise of his campaign that he knew how to get tariffs removed. He promised Canadians that he would have a deal by the end of July, and we're almost a year into his mandate, and he has failed to get a deal. That was the signature campaign.
And we're about to hear him repeat the same statement about 3 or 4 times. He sounds like a broken record, and I agree with everything he's saying, but you really need to set the stage and set the narrative. And Mark Carney has already moved on to Alberta independence versus nationalists, Trump derangement syndrome. That's what this next election is going to be framed in. And I honestly think Carney's probably going to win a majority from it. He's still on these old talking points, and they're gonna have to do something else. I mean, I agree with these things, and you should say them, but you're gonna need to repackage them somehow, because I don't think it's gonna beat TDS.
Campaign promise that he made, and Canadians are rightly concerned at his inability to do what he said he would.
Trump went back on plenty of deals he signed with the UK. Basically, everyone he signed a deal with over the last year and hit them with a tariff anyway. So where does that leave Canada in trying to negotiate with someone who doesn't really care about what his own Supreme Court says or past deals he signed even in the last year?
Mark Carney didn't say he'd give it the old college try during the campaign. He didn't say that he could only get a deal if Donald Trump did certain things. He promised Canadians, he made it the signature central plank of his campaign that he knew how to handle the U.S. president and that he would get a deal to get tariffs removed. That's what he said. So it's up to Mark Carney to explain why here we are almost a year into his term and he has failed to get the deal that he promised Canadians.
And pause it again, like, oh, no, that's good. And this was part of the point I was making earlier. Pierre Poilievre has a different strategy when it comes to natural resources, but he's repeating a lot of the liberal talking points when it says we need to diversify our economy. He's blaming the Americans. He needs to take a different stance and reframe why Carney isn't getting a tariff deal and why he can get a tariff deal. And the truth is he's more ideologically aligned, being a conservative, with the Trump administration. And he's unwilling to say that because he thinks the moderates will turn their back on him at that point. But he's going to have to reframe it somehow, and he's going to need to. This TDS is just out of control, not just on the Liberal side, but the Conservatives definitely have a streak of it as well, and it's not benefiting Canada in the long term.
But also, Carney continues to have very different priorities because he could be working on the country, and yet. From CBC Watcher says, quote, Carney says, I'm going to announce now, I guess, that we're tightening sanctions, including on the shadow fleet, additional 100 vessels in Russia's shadow fleet.
In English, there was a meeting this morning, very early this morning, of the Coalition of the Willing I participated in, including President Zelensky, chaired by President Macron, pardon me, and Prime Minister Starmer. Several things to take from that. First, as I said just at the end, Russia is failing to achieve all of its objectives 4 years into this conflict.
He mentioned Zelensky there. Zelensky was talking about World War III openly today. So they're also looking, the UK and Zelensky, to get another 3 years of funding so they can wait Donald Trump out and try to turn this to World War III. Mark Carney here has earmarked another $2 billion to go to Ukraine when Canada is absolutely financially strapped at this point. And he's getting no pushback from the Conservatives on this. They were just at a rally yesterday, Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre,
for Ukraine,
talking about Ukraine needs more funding as well. So
conflict 12 years if you include its annexation, its illegal annexation of Crimea. But 4 years on, Russia is failing militarily, strategically, and
pause it again, sorry. And he keeps saying Russia's failing militarily, and this is kind of the narrative the West wants to build. Russia, China, and Iran are aligned, and what they want is to drag this war out and thin out the U.S. assets between Iran, between Russia, between Venezuela. They want multiple deployments, so they're not going to be strong in any one place. If this war comes to an end, it's not going to benefit China. China's doing a lot of the shot calling here, I think, as well.
And we are in it for the long term. Canada and the coalition of the willing, and to that end, we will announce shortly, I'm going to announce now, I guess, that we are tightening sanctions, including on the shadow fleet, the additional 100 vessels in Russia's shadow fleet. This is the fleet that effectively facilitates illegal exports of crude oil. So we're tightening that lifeblood from the Russian economy, along with our allies. Also, additional financial sanctions, a lowering of the oil price cap in coordination with the EU and the United Kingdom. In addition, $2 billion of additional aid, military aid for Ukraine over the course of the next year. We're announcing that today. The Minister of National.
What about for your own people? What about the healthcare system? What about everything else?
You can leave it there. It would be one thing if Canada wasn't in such dire straits, and if Canada hadn't already donated more than any other country, including the U.S., per capita. It's absolutely insane. They need to get a peace negotiation on this. Europe doesn't want it, and that's why this thing continues on. Okay, we can continue to the next story there.
Okay. And we're moving on to what continues to happen here in Mexico and the different responses that we've seen from the U.S. versus the Canadian response about all the tourists stranded in Puerto Vallarta and other Mexican cities that are just faced with endless violence.
Yeah, I like the U.S. response, and the U.S. can respond like this because they have a functionally international military. The Canadian response was just spineless and ballless. We're going to show both responses here, but this is how they view their own citizens.
So this is from Benny Johnson.
Well, Secretary Rubio and the State Department are absolutely on it. We hear from Americans directly who are in Mexico because the State Department immediately set up 24/7 phone lines, and they're taking hundreds of calls a day, providing Americans on the ground with travel support and advice. The State Department also has issued new travel advisories, and they'll continue to update those as the situation progresses. So we encourage all Americans in Mexico to, of course, adhere to the guidance provided by the State Department. Right now, we are unaware of any reports of any Americans being hurt, kidnapped, or killed, and the Mexican drug cartels know know not to lay a finger on a single American, or they will pay severe consequences under this president. And they already are. This operation, which was carried out successfully by the Mexican authorities, was, of course, supported by the United States, would not have happened without the leadership of President Trump. He has made it a day one priority to target and go after these vicious drug cartels that have shipped deadly poison to our country for far too long. He signed an executive order to rightfully designate them as foreign terrorist organizations. We've seen the president take unilateral lethal action against drug boats sailing through the Caribbean. And now, of course, we are coordinating and cooperating and pushing the Mexican government to do more to end the scourge of deadly drugs coming through our United States southern border, which, of course,
and you
is
can
now
leave it there.
secure.
And the big part of that statement that I took is you're not going to lay a hand on any American citizens or there's going to be repercussions. And he has loaded military equipment at the border. Right now, Sheinbaum is cooperating to an extent. If anything happens to an American citizen, you better believe he's going to demand full cooperation and come after those citizens and make sure they get them back and make sure there's a statement made to the cartels here in Mexico. Now let's take a look at what the Canadians said.
Yeah, let's see the contrast from Anita Anand. This is from CBC Watcher.
In Mexico is becoming more stable. Flights have resumed. In other words, Canadian Airlines have announced as of last night and this morning that they are resuming some of their flights. In addition, the advice of local authorities continues to be of preeminent importance. As you know, the volatility and the instability differs throughout the country in different regions. For that reason,
just the absolute tone of the situation is just that, and then you got the words on top of it. It's a failure of Canadian citizens stranded in Mexico.
We are advising Canadians who remain in Mexico at this time to follow the advice of local authorities. In addition, we are also encouraging Canadians to register with our ROCA system. I indicated yesterday that the number of registrations had increased by 8,000 in the previous 24 hours. We are now at about 55,000 Canadians who have registered with the ROCA system.
Okay, that's good. We got a hotline you can call. And just wait for Air Canada. They'll open things back up. I like the statement that the U.S. put out there. You don't touch an American citizen, there's going to be repercussions. And that's backed up with military personnel right on the border, ready to go. There's already cooperation with the Mexican military. So those are real threats. And the cartel really are taking those to heart right now.
Mm-hmm. But now let's see and talk about the continuous floor crossings from Mark Nixon. Quote, the CBC is despicable. Instead of asking how much were the floor crossers paid, what benefits did they get, treasonous people.
And after this clip, we'll read some comments. Yes. So I would say leave more comments, but I think we're backlogged here a little bit.
They focus on the conservatives, Giovanni not talking to the CBC and posting on X about a trip to DC. No wonder people are leaving the party.
And I think there's a lot of self-inflicted problems. MPs were kept out of this room for a very long time, kept off CBC.
Out of this room, you mean?
Yeah, and told that they could not come on CBC. And then Jamil Giovanni wants to go to DC and he can say whatever he wants. And he says one message to Breitbart, says another message to the National Post, says another on Twitter. No, if I was in that caucus, I'd be annoyed too. And I think there's a lot of self-inflicted problems.
Yeah, that's an issue. Yeah, now you're inviting conservatives on, but when they come on, you're still going to grill them. You're going to try to frame the narrative, and not everybody's invited every time. It's a liberal panel after liberal panel. This is the mainstream media. Even conservative, smart,
bought and paid for by the federal government.
Smart conservative politicians are obviously going to go to independent media at this point.
Exactly, because otherwise their voices are not heard.
Yeah, and I like Jamil Giovanni, and I like what he did there. I mean.
Harmony says, too many bureaucrats in healthcare and in education, both ideologies based on I feel, not for the parents or the students, or certainly they could be much more.
Yeah, and it's an absolute shame what's happening, not just to the Canadian healthcare system, but the education system. This is happening in Europe, the UK. It's almost like a intentional destruction of a lot of these institutions. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to see Donald Trump is trying to push back on this, and hopefully that doesn't happen to the United States. The rot is deep in the United States as well. But at least they have somebody trying to do something about it. Even if it fails, at least you got somebody trying to do some common sense shit.
Exactly. Roland Chapin says, when Alberta gets free, come for a visit. Maybe you can stay. We need good journalists. Well, we're more citizens that just talk about what's going on. But
Yeah, we'll be coming in the summertime if we come. It's freaking cold there.
yes, it is. Very cold.
Although when I did work in northern BC, one day I got negative 70 at a mine I was working at with the wind chill. You had to wear goggles. If you didn't have those goggles, your eyes would freeze shut.
You. Lyle Norman says Ezra is from Alberta too, because we played a clip from Ezra earlier.
Yeah, Ezra's great, and he knows he's a target for the federal government once these censorship laws come in. So he's going to be firmly on the side of Alberta independence, and I think he'll move the headquarters of Rebel News there if the independence movement is successful. So he's not just supporting it, he's supporting it on a business level as well. He has a lot of motivation to support the independence movement.
Roland Chapin says we need 1.6 million votes to win Alberta independence.
Well, and I'm going to say this, like some polls are saying 41%, others saying 30%. Any independence movement that has had over 30% has been successful all around the world. So it's people that are motivated to go out to the polls are the same people. They're already showing their motivation to sign this petition. Number one, they're fearful of what the Canadian government might do. So the fact that they're willing to sign that petition shows that they're going to go to they're going to go on voting day to vote for independence. A lot of these people that want to maybe stay part of Canada are kind of unsure, and they're probably going to stay home if they have work or something else.
Pete says, if Carney messes with the internet, Alberta will not withstand and beef up our fiber to the U.S. and U.S. internet providers, Starlink, maybe get some satellites up in the air, get Elon Musk to, because he's been supporting these kinds of stuff, like him or hate him. I mean, yeah, that's what's going to have to be done if and when, I would say, the Liberals and Carney and the federal government decides to continue with their censorship tirade.
Yeah, I was looking at new versions of the internet that's coming out because of how much censorship that has come globally, especially into the West over the last few years, whether it's the UK, the EU, Canada has a massive amount of bills ready to go if Carney gets the majority. The only country holding it back is kind of Donald Trump with Elon Musk. And if you take Donald Trump out of the equation, Elon Musk doesn't have that protection. And a lot of these social media companies in the States have already shown a willingness to work with a censorship regime like Biden. But there's new forms of the internet coming out with messaging services and things like that that aren't connected to the traditional internet. So I think those kinds of technologies are going to come bigger and bigger over the next few years.
Pete says all the flags had creases in them. Too funny.
Yeah.
And that's how you know if they're paid or not, if it's all new flags that they just got when they got there.
Yeah, so you always look for flags with creases. And are they homemade signs, meaning made with marker and cardboard, or are they printed at a print shop? If they're printed at a print shop and you got creases in the flags, it's a paid for protest through an NGO usually. And that's why the EU protests, where you see all the EU flags, it's always printed signs and brand new EU flags taken out of the package, because nobody really supports the United Nations. It's taking country sovereignty within the EU, not giving more freedoms.
And Harmony says, you're right, the guy, in regard to the difference between USA and Canada officials. Canadian minister is pathetic.
Yeah.
Pete says, Alberta wants
Are you bringing the messages on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, you are.
Pete says Alberta wants northern deep water pipeline and tanker access. This will avoid the channels. And I'm sure they've thought about it because it's been so long that they've been wanting to do it. But Pete also says everyone except Canadians with the Liberals. I forgot what we were talking about there, but I mean, yes. Pete says employees in Ontario have to pay EHT as well as federal taxes and still cannot get a family doctor.
Well, I want
to
talk about his, I got back from the restroom real quick. His last comment where he says they want access to the coast and they want a pipeline. Yeah. And if they don't get that, they're going to put a massive tariff on BC. And all they want in return, they want to have a good business relationship with British Columbia, but they're going to want access to the coast. Even without a pipeline, just access to the coast is probably enough to lower the tariff and have no tariff. But if BC wants to mess around, it's tariff time.
Pete says, I don't particularly like bankers, but I don't S-talk them when I want a mutually beneficial agreement.
Yeah, and as YouTube has kind of come along, I've changed my view on some lawyers, especially constitutional lawyers, like a Jeffrey Raff, like a Keith Wilson. Robert Barnes in the United States is cut from that same cloth. He's absolutely amazing. He works with Viva Fry. They have a channel together. Their Sunday show is fantastic. He goes over all the constitutional issues, primarily in the United States. So I recommend that.
And Pete says Liberal MPs must be forced to attend a word salad as a second language class. And yeah, probably. But also the reporters, whenever they're framing questions, they're obviously framing questions, especially when they go to conservatives, for the narrative that they're being paid to produce by the federal government, which is Liberals. So it's just a circle of jerks.
Well, also the Chihuahua we showed earlier with the gray hair, I think his name's Champagne. We got another clip of him. I still hate him, but I have a little bit of respect for him after Rebel News approached him in Davos.
Oh, yeah. I forgot
And he walked nice and slow. He slowed down his pace, took all the questions, asked if they had more questions, thanked them at the end, was cordial and nice to him. And that's the first time I've ever seen a Liberal MP within Canada treat independent media and specifically Rebel News with any kind of respect. Even though I disagree with him ideologically, after seeing that, I have a little bit more leeway for him, even though I think he's a shady politician at his core.
Yeah, and that was Ezra Levant again.
But other Liberals should take a page out of his book because even though I didn't like his answers, he came across a lot better than any other Liberal I've ever seen in Canada.
Let's now continue to see Liberal and federal wasting of money.
Oh, we caught up on the questions?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
From Wiretap Media, quote, the Canadian taxpayers' new 1.2 million Muslim youth gang prevention program will be used to teach kids how to learn Arabic and be more Muslim instead of being Canadian. Canadians deserve representation that will preserve culture and heritage. Which the Liberals obviously don't want to do, and they want to continue with their little.
Well, and we can just leave it there. He's going to just say, I kind of wanted to leave it here. I just wanted to kind of read the top there and say we should have a unified identity. What are we going to give? $1.2 million to the Muslim community, and then the Chinese community, then the Jewish community, then this community, every single community to protect their own identity.
Except the Canadian community.
Rather than having a unified identity, yeah, I just don't like this. There's a lot of programs like this that silo these communities even more rather than creating
that encourages the separation.
Yeah, rather than having a unified front in Canada. Okay, we can go to the next one.
Which is similar because from Wiretap Media too, quote, the Manitoba government is giving the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce $100,000 in tax dollars, so your dollars, to help fight extortion happening to the Punjabi community perpetrated by the Punjabi people. This is the most clever Indian scam to date. And that's exactly what it is.
It's the hugest scam
Give us
community.
money so we stop us scamming us over there.
And we have a Canadian audience, but if anybody's not from Canada, the Punjabi community within Canada is running all kinds of scams. But the fact that they're in cahoots this openly is insane. We'll actually play this clip, I guess.
Yeah, we're going to have more to say about the hotline later this afternoon. I'd be happy to spend some time with you, Ian, or anyone else that wants to hear a little bit about the specifics. What we're doing is we're providing the money directly to the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce, allowing them to build out the resources.
The community that created the problem is now going to get more money for that problem. Do you think the problem is going to get bigger or smaller?
And to be able to be a partner, not only with us as a provincial government, but with law enforcement directly to ensure that they're hearing the voices in an ongoing way of community. So what we're talking about is the ability of the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce to not only be that reactive body, but also a proactive voice in sharing information, ensuring that the community has the best information possible, and then those additional resources to ensure that their voices are now getting back to the appropriate folks within law enforcement. What we'll hear today is a little bit more from groups like Crime Stoppers. We're going to have a lot of...
Okay, you can leave it there, but this reminds me of what happened in India. In India, they had a snake problem. So what the government did was give a bounty for every snake you brought in. So what the Indian people ended up doing was breeding snakes, killing them all, and bringing them in for the bounty rather than catching wild snakes. In this situation, what you're going to have happen is you give them $100,000 to fix this problem of corruption. What you're going to see is more corruption by fewer groups, meaning you're going to have a consolidation of corruption, but it's going to get much larger. And then they're going to say, Well, we have cleaned up corruption because certain groups that are within that, they're going to bust. They're going to give them a sacrificial lamb so they can say to the government, we're actually cleaning it up. Look at all the things we did, but we're going to need more money because the problem's actually grown because more immigrants have come into the country. When they're just going to consolidate corruption within fewer and fewer groups within that community and then say they need more money to fix the problem. Same thing with the snake issue in India.
And then you just praised Champagne, but
Oh, yeah.
he does sound like somebody whose mother told him he was perfect and never did anything wrong.
Yeah, and I don't agree with him here, and I don't usually agree with him, but the way he did treat Rebel News and the way he treats independent media is better than most other politicians, but he's
And I
still...
mean, and that's saying something, just treating them with common decency.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen when this gentleman was in Davos and he was approached by Rebel News, it's an actual great clip and how the, liberal politicians should treat independent media.
I would say this man, not a gentleman. From Jasmine Lane, Francois Philippe Champagne says people rejoice when they see him at the airport. He says everybody stops him and Canadians love what they're doing.
But it's certainly it's a great place.
When you win?
Hey, listen, one thing I've learned in politics, I've done 4 election humility. Humility, but confidence, you know, you have to be humble because people make their choice. But I think the plan that we've put together, if you look at the Canadians, have understood that the plan we have put to grow the economy, to put Canada on the right track for the future, to build international partnerships, to diversify. Listen, I've never seen so many people stopping me at the airport. I've been minister for close to 10 years. Canadians understand this is a special time, and I'm humble in one way because when you go to the polls, eventually you have always to be humble. But at the same time, I feel the Canadian spirit of unity behind the government to say this is a special time and let's unite together. Let's fight for Canada. Let's build Canada.
Okay. And I noticed he said, never in my career have so many people stopped me at the airport. He didn't say to say good things. Yeah. He implied that, but he didn't say
because
it.
they love what we're doing.
Yeah, it's
No,
because they hate you.
Yeah, it's because somebody wants to yell at you. But because of, and Mario Salaya says, things that didn't exist 11 years ago. And I think he lists them all, but starting with believing there are only 2 genders getting you a $750,000
Yeah, we got 3 stories, I think, and then we'll take any more comments that we have right before we go to Rumble for the last couple of stories that are too hot for YouTube.
Trust me, this is really good, and these are the things that didn't exist 11 years ago when the Conservatives were in power. Canadians being fined $750,000 for questioning gender identity. Refugees getting better healthcare access than we do, but we get the bill. Being such a successful country that we actually need to give GST rebates because people can't afford food. Despite having CBC as their propaganda arm, they still pay nearly $2 million to influencers to fight disinformation. 11 years ago, our government didn't need to build us affordable homes. We could afford them ourselves. We used to keep criminals like this in jail, but now we have bail and not jail. 11 years ago, this would have been unheard of, where criminals get to claim refugee status so they can stay in the country. Having our prime minister say our biggest security threat to our country is China. Then shortly afterwards, turned a blind eye to the fact and make a deal with them.
And pause it.
Back then, we were...
And this is important because it seems like a lot of people, especially politically minded people, have short-term memories and voters have short-term memories. So it's good to remember all the things they did. I think Albertans have a little bit longer term of a memory, and that's why I think this independence vote's going to go good. It's not even these issues. It's issues even further back from this, like the truckers convoy, like the jibby jab.
Smart enough not to target law-abiding citizens, to the point where the police know that the gun buyback program that exists today isn't going to make you safer, so they won't participate in it. 11 years ago, our government would have never enacted the Wartime Measures Act. And yes, that's what it used to be called before it was rebranded to the Emergencies Act. They wouldn't have done it on their citizens, and they wouldn't have done it unlawfully and illegally. And finally, 11 years ago, Canada was safe enough where the police didn't have to tell you to leave your keys by the front door to avoid a home invasion. My friends, under a Conservative government, 11 years ago, life was affordable, safe, and good.
No, Canada's not going to vote for a Conservative government. If they do, it's going to be a minority, and that's the issue. That's why we left Canada.
And that does nothing.
That's why people don't have hope in Canada anymore, and that's why Alberta is ready to leave.
Well, they've taken all that hope away by showing that at least most citizens, and I'd say this living in BC, just, again, lemmings.
Yeah.
willing to bring everybody with them as they jump off the cliff and continue to vote for Liberals.
Well,
that
they're gonna
have
pull
gotten
you-
them in the positions they're in the first place.
They're going to pull you off the cliff with them, and you're not going to have a choice. Alberta has a choice and I hope they choose their own future here. Okay, let's go into the next story, which is Nova Scotia.
From CBC Watcher, Nova Scotia is running massive deficits, but CBC's international climate correspondent, because that's a job, wants them to take up a wind farm because now Trump has abandoned it.
Yeah. All the other countries are starting to abandon this because Trump kind of shined a light on this. Yet Mark Carney, the national government in most of these provinces and the mainstream media is going to bring Canada down this path of self-destruction. These wind farms don't produce enough power. They're extremely costly to manufacture. They actually take a ton of oil to run these things that people don't understand. And when it's they have about a 10-year lifespan, when it's time to recycle them and put new blades up there, they're unable to recycle them, so they just have to bury them in the ground. They're a complete fraud of all the kind of natural energies there were. This was the biggest fraud of most of them. And they kill a ton of wildlife.
Donald Trump's attacks on wind power are putting a chill on investments across the U.S. Atlantic coast. But one American politician says Trump's aversion to offshore wind projects could actually benefit Canada.
And pause it for a second. And why am I so against these wind farms? I mean, what happened off of Germany? They're currently trying to sell a lot of their windmills. It completely failed. They're unable to even sell these assets now. Nobody wants them. They were a complete fraud.
Climate correspondent Susan Ormiston with that story.
President Donald Trump is engaged in a war on wind.
There are windmills all over the place. They are losers.
We're on the New England coast near Newport, Rhode Island, and just off here, 24 kilometers, is a large wind turbine project. Almost finished. One of 5 projects in development up and down this coast. But twice since August, the U.S. Department of the Interior has forced stop work orders.
And pause it again. They're out in the middle of the ocean. You know how hard those things are to repair? Do you know how hard it was to put those things in?
And the wildlife that keeps bumping into them.
And when I was researching this the other day even more, I already knew a lot about wind energy and why it's not cost effective. But you have to build the infrastructure to get the cabling from the wind in the middle of the ocean back to the grid, and it's usually extremely remote. So they prefer to access other forms of energy. It's just not sufficient energy. And it's not worth the billions you're pumping into it. The only way you're able to pump this amount of money is through propaganda.
These companies, hundreds of millions of dollars, and workers their jobs.
There was a pipeline of work that was promised for decades. They feel betrayed. They feel like they've been punched in the gut.
We reached Rhode Island Democrat Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
With all of the funding that the fossil fuel industry has given to Trump, this is kind of payback.
But the offshore wind companies are fighting back, taking the Trump administration to court. In 5 legal challenges in January and February, the stop work orders were overturned. So now business is back and work is resuming here at this pier in New London, Connecticut. Ørsted, a big offshore Danish company, is rushing to get 2 wind farms completed. One, Revolution Wind, is expected to start producing power soon at rates lower than power from natural gas. In a strange twist, the attempted purge here in New England could be of benefit to Canada in the long run, with Nova Scotia's premier pushing for wind power off the East Coast.
The interest is through the roof. There's a lot of eyes on Nova Scotia right now. There's a lot of eyes on Canada right now.
Wind West could take nearly a decade and $40 billion to build. Transmission lines, another $20 billion.
The industry will pay. Governments, there's a role for governments, tax credits. We're having, very encouraging discussions with the federal government.
Globally, wind...
Government's going to pay. Government's going to pay. This is private industry. If it's so profitable, the private industry would pay for it. When they estimate how much the power costs, they only estimate the windmill itself and not all the other infrastructure. This is completely, this is a complete fraud. I don't know how many times I can say it, but it really, really pisses me off.
Power is accelerating, with the UK and Europe just recommitting to speed up plans for wind power in the North Sea. But here, clearly President Trump is putting a wind chill.
Okay, you can leave it on there.
And that's not even true because they're getting rid of them too.
They're getting rid of them, and especially Germany is. All these countries are realizing it's not working. Germany is starting to invest in coal plants because it's the only way to. And coal is one of the worst forms of energy. They demolished their nuclear plants, then they put up wind farms. It wasn't enough energy, so now they're building coal plants because it's the only thing they can build fast enough that will give consistent energy to the grid.
And she also mentioned the UK there. The UK at least the London grid, they sold all the London grid to China. China is managing London's power,
Well,
which
that's
is
why
insane too.
China loves a lot of the stuff because a lot of the stuff is
Gets produced
manufactured
there.
in China, and it handicaps the Western countries that adopt this kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go into the last story, and then we'll take any comments that are left.
This is kind of relevant to everything we've been saying today, but from Ellie Cantin Nantel, quote, Canadians are propagandized. All of your media is funded by the government, which I always say, every single journalist, every single outlet, which shows the importance of independent media and just regular citizens speaking up as well.
And it's a pretty long clip, so we'll play some of it. But
of the Liberals, who for 10 years implemented policies that I think, and I think you would probably agree with this, destroyed the country. You know, $670 billion of canceled oil and gas projects, mass immigration with over 1 million people coming in each year, including people that don't share our values, who have been, you know, terrorizing Jewish people, for example, simply because they're Jewish. You've had, you know, the deficits, $300 billion on servicing deficits from the time Trudeau was elected until 2030. The value of the dollar going down, down, down. You have people fleeing the country for economic reasons, people fleeing the country for safety. I've heard of stories of immigrants fleeing places like Brampton and Surrey to go back to their original country because they feel like Canada is so dangerous now. And yet, people re-elected the Liberals last year because Orange Man bad, because they thought the Liberals would put Canada in such a vulnerable position vis-a-vis the United States, were the ones to get us out of that position. What do you make of what we see in Canada, and do you think people are propagandized, and how does that work if that's the case?
I mean, I think you laid it out beautifully, Ellie. Like, you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, the country is falling apart. It's objectively much, much worse than it was 10 years ago. And like, there's only one direction that we're headed, right? You need a real change. And it seemed so obvious to everyone that Justin Trudeau had to go, and that the Conservatives, it was like their turn. And then, you know, the confluence of sort of black swan events with President Trump, and then Mark Carney coming in and shifting the party and kind of like turning his back on everything the Liberals had done in the last 10 years, but only in rhetoric and not really in action. Like, it's sad to see, right?
And pause it.
And
yeah, and I don't think Trump had to be that black swan event is the thing. It was such an ideological change. A country like Canada had propagandized their citizens to such a heavy extent. It became a black swan event. But if they hadn't been so propagandized, a lot of what Trump is doing is not only good, but it's great for the country. And the United States is growing at a faster rate than China, and it's the first time in decades. And he's only been in office 1 year.
A number of things that also happened, right? Like, I think the major part of the reason why Mark Carney won was because the NDP just utterly collapsed, right? Like, Conservatives actually did better in the 2025 election than they've ever done in any previous election. They got 41% of the vote, which even Stephen Harper's majority government in 2015, I think he only got 39%. So, like, the Conservative vote was there. It's just that the other two parties, the other party collapsed and coalesced around Mark Carney.
And if there was proper representation in Canada and it was by population, the Conservatives would undoubtedly win most elections. The issue is the way the electoral system is set up in Canada. It's literally a rigged system. And I think that's the main reason Alberta needs to get out of Canada and vote for independence. It doesn't matter if you throw a pipeline or anything else. They're not going to give you any more political power. They're not going to give you real representation.
Mm-hmm. Everything the Liberals had done in the last 10 years, but only in rhetoric and not really in action. Like, it's sad to see, right? And I mean, there were a number of things that also happened, right? Like, I think the major part of the reason why Mark Carney won was because the NDP just utterly collapsed, right?
Okay, we can kind of leave it there, and we'll read any comments before we go to RUMBLE.
I think we're out of comments right now.
Oh, okay.
So I guess we will just head over to RUMBLE. If you don't know or didn't know, we are also live streaming on Rumble, which are right there. You can find our username right there. And there are a few spicy stories that we're not able to do here on YouTube because YouTube gets angry.
And if you're not subscribed, please do so. We're still a small channel, so every subscriber really does still help at this point. And thanks for everybody tuning in. If you're going to tune in tomorrow, we're going to do international geopolitics with probably a small segment on Alberta independence. And then Friday, the entire show is again about Alberta independence.
But yes, tomorrow we will probably talk about Candace Owens' new attacks and new series of attack, literal series on Erica Kirk, and then also the State of the Union in the US and what's been going on here in Mexico since the violence erupted on Sunday. Yeah. So that's tomorrow. So we'll see you in a bit over at RUMBLE. We'll see you there.